Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see everybody in person and also virtually. Welcome to the February 27th Landmarks Commission meeting. In compliance with notification requirements of the Ohio Opening Meeting Law and Section 101.021 of the Codified Ordinance of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by roll call vote. Recusal from any case due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the beginning of the presentation. In order to ensure that every participant in the meeting has the opportunity to be heard, virtual attendants will use the raised hand feature before asking a question or making a comment. The raised hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile version and activated by clicking the hand icon. Please wait for the chair or facilitator to recognize you and be sure to select unmute and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking the raised hand icon again and muting your microphone. Call-in users can unmute by using *6. All meeting activities are being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube. All requests to speak on a particular matter submitted through the proper channels has been considered. Proper channels for comments are sending an email to the landmark@clevelandohio.gov email address with a comment or letter, calling and or leaving a message at 216-664-2532, sending a letter or dropping off comments to City Hall located at 601 Lakeside Avenue, Suite 519. Communication with members of the body must follow proper channels for consideration. Any comments received by the stated deadline are collected by the Landmark staff and disseminated to the commission members prior to the meeting or scheduled meeting. Mr. Musson?
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to go over the meeting rules and procedures, the chair will call each agenda item and then each applicant will be invited to proceed through their presentation. Each presentation should be completed prior to questions and comments from the commission in order to facilitate a smooth presentation. Once the presentation is concluded, the chair will ask Landmark staff to summarize design review advisory committee recommendations and any public comments received. The deadline for public comment is noon on the Tuesday prior to any regularly scheduled Cleveland Landmarks Commission meeting. Any received comments are distributed to commission members prior to the meeting. Staff will also identify any members of the public present and scheduled to speak. Public comment is allowed at the discretion of the chair, and any individual providing public comment is permitted 2 minutes to speak to the agenda item in which they have an interest. The chair will then request a recommendation from staff. The commission will then begin deliberations and project review. Any commission member except the chair may make a motion at any point after an agenda item has been called.
I'd like to call to order the February 27th, 2025 Landmarks Commission meeting. Mr. Musson, please call roll.
Ms. Anderson?
Yeah, here.
Mr. Dreyer?
Here.
Mr. Dulick? Here. Interim Director Fields?
Here.
Councilmember Gray?
Here.
Mr. Lozier? Mr. Sambry?
Here.
Mr. Strickland?
Here.
Mr. Trosick?
Here.
Dr. Williams?
Here.
And Ms. Trott?
Here.
All right, Madam Chair, we do have quorum. I'd also like to note that in addition to myself from Landmark staff, we have Jessica Beam and Carl Brunges with us, and then Sierra Lipscomb from the Law Department.
Excellent. We'll begin today with our certificates of appropriateness. We'd like to welcome our first applicant to come forward or unmute your mic, announce yourself, and tell us about your project.
We need that too.
Oh, first, I apologize. We need to untable, we need a motion to untable the case. Can I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Dulick. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sandberry. Mr. Musson, please call roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dreyer?
Yes.
Mr. Dulick? Yes. Interim Director Fields?
Yes.
Councilmember Gray? Mr. Sambry?
Yes.
Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Trosick?
Yes.
Dr. Williams?
Yes.
And Ms. Trott?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Now we'd like to welcome the applicant to come forward, announce yourself, and tell us about your project.
Good morning. My name is Crystal Sierra. I'm the Planning Director for Slavic Village Development, presenting the proposed demolition of 5416 Broadway Avenue, also known as Brown Furniture. Should I share my screen to start the presentation?
I believe we have the presentation on our side and we can advance. Just please tell us when you'd like us to advance.
Okay, great. Next slide, please. 5416 Broadway Avenue, presenting the proposed demolition. This is a photo of the front of the building facing Broadway. Next slide, please. And this is an eagle eye view of the building, 5416 Broadway. We're proposing a demolition of a 13,818 square foot retail building at the corner of Broadway and Barkwell. Next slide, please. We seek approval to demolish the two-story building. This is a retail structure. The structure was built in 1890 with additions built in 1900 and 1946. Slavic Village Development is the current owner. It is vacant. The city has received 21 formal complaints since 2008. And they have boarded it up 8 times since then. CCLRC has boarded it 1 time and we have boarded it twice. Taxes are current at $2,492.46. Next slide. So this is a lot of background information, a lot of which the Landmarks Commission has already reviewed at our prior hearing on September 12th. I'd like to bring your attention to August 21st, August 2021 through 2025, when SVD took ownership of the building. There were 8 complaints to the city. We boarded it 2 times, the city boarded it 3 times, and CCLRC boarded it once. In October of 2023, CCLRC put the property on their demo list for state funds. And in August of 2024, we were notified that those funds had been secured. In September of 2024, we presented the demo to the Central Southeast Design Review as well as Landmarks. The Design Review District recommended demolition. And then this body requested renovation versus demo analysis, as well as a plan to protect the adjacent structure at 5316 Barkwell, a historic salvage plan, and temporary use to include no parking. On February 6th of 2025, so less than a month ago, the city did issue an order for demolition. Next slide. So this is a copy of the order for demolition from the city of Cleveland. The city did conduct a phase 1 environmental assessment and deemed the interior of the structure hazardous. They could not fully complete the asbestos survey due to interior collapse, which they cite in the order. The Department of Building and Housing did issue that order on February 6th. Next slide. So I'd like to bring on Jim Mayer from the County Land Bank to talk about the demolition plan as well as the protection plan for 5316 Barkwell.
Good morning. My name is Jim Mayer. I'm with the Cuyahoga Land Bank, and we're doing the demolition on behalf of Slavic Village. And in this slide, what's shown at the front of the building is pedestrian protection, essentially to prevent fall hazards once the demolition is underway. And on the southern red line is the adjacent structure, which was built in 1900. It's very helpful to know the dates when the buildings were built. So the building that has a 0 on it, that is on the northern corner of the building to be demolished, was built in 1900. And then directly behind that, essentially the garage off of Barkwell Court was built in 1890. And the building, the long building that goes from Broadway to Barkwell, that has the 5416 on it, was built in 1946. So the adjacent structures that are at risk are the Barkwell corner. It's on the Barkwell Avenue Street. That building predates and is taller. Both of those buildings on the adjacent to the demolition are taller than the building that we're proposing to demolish. So that, and they're taller and older, which hopefully there's going to be a finished wall when we uncover it. On the northern building, it definitely has a finished brick veneer that should come away unscathed. And I do have some additional photos that show the conditions of the areas to be demolished. So this is our structure, which, as you can see, the building to be demolished, proposed to be demolished on the right, it is lower than the adjacent structure and newer, 1946 versus 1900. The next slide, please. And then the building on the corner of Barkwell Court and Barkwell Street is also taller, and that is all brick veneer. So next slide, please. Okay, these are examples of the proposed salvage, and I'd actually like Crystal to speak on this.
Absolutely. So for the historic salvage plan, we're looking at salvaging the front concrete entry with the Patax name. Next slide, please. And then as far as temporary use, what you're seeing here is the rear elevation. The two structures at the rear of the property will be demoed. Next slide. New green space will be created. We'll grade, seed, and maintain this green space. We're also working with the city to install a new guardrail along Barkwell Court to prevent vehicular access and a cut through from Barkwell to Broadway. Next slide. For our rehab versus demo analysis, I'm going to bring Jim back on to share CCLRC's findings.
We did meet with a contractor who looked at this and wasn't able to walk through because the interior has very unsafe floors. The 1946 portion of the building has a basement. The earlier structures were crawl space, or along Barkwell Court, they have some slab areas because there's no off-street parking in this building. So that was a delivery area with overhead garage doors. The roof is also collapsing in areas. There's multiple skylights in the structure, and they seem to have been the Achilles heel, which allowed water to pour in, and over time has essentially destroyed the structural integrity of the building. I believe we're going to be seeing some slides that show the condition of the basement. My coworker and I got into the basement by extending a ladder into it and then getting around the fallen debris because the asbestos surveyor couldn't enter the building all the way, but we were able to get down there. I do that to see if an asbestos surveyor can't enter or say it's unsafe, there is always the opportunity to still prove that there's no asbestos in the property because that changes the way demolition can advance. So, but what we saw when we got into the basement was that the forced air heating system had asbestos duct wrap and large size ducts, but many of the ducts were gone, indicating that the asbestos wrap was in the structure, intermixed with all the debris. So it's a situation where there's no ability to quantify the amount of asbestos, and there's no ability to safely remove the asbestos. So all of the interior components are considered contaminated. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Jim. If we could back up 3 slides, please. I'd like to read Taylor Company's statement for the record. So we received a statement from Taylor Companies of Ohio from President Brian Taylor on February 19th. Subject is site review structural evaluation regarding 5416 Broadway Avenue. The statement reads, Taylor Companies of Ohio has agreed to provide an inspection to the above property mentioned to provide our professional opinion if the building has potential to be renovated or salvaged to meet today's building standards. The site was inspected on February 12th, 2025 by Nick Sickeries, Estimator, Health and Safety Director with Taylor Companies of Ohio, and myself, Brian Taylor, President, Taylor Companies of Ohio. Interior access was provided by Crystal Sierra, and a visual inspection of the complete exterior of the building was completed. Current roofing system appears to have several penetrations or failures over an extended period of time, creating areas of rotten framing materials and even complete failure of structural materials, including sections of flooring throughout the building. The current interior finishes have plasterboard and pipe wrap materials mixed in with the debris, with limited to no access for remediation, including no safe access to building conditions. The exterior of the building is in very poor condition. No stability or solid structure on 3 of the exterior evaluations is visible or able to be confirmed. Conclusion, due to the extensive water intrusion, failure of interior and exterior structural building components, and the presence of existing health hazards to be remediated with no access would make this property a total loss. The property is recommended to be raised or demolished as soon as possible for health and safety reasons. Thank you, Brian Taylor, President. Next slide. So this is the site context for the building for 5416 Broadway. To the right, you'll see Barkwell Avenue bisected by Broadway. I'm sorry, to the left, you'll see Barkwell Avenue bisected by Broadway, and to the right, you'll see East 55th. Next slide. These are exterior photos of the front of the building facing east. Next slide. Additional photos of the front enclave facing east. Next slide. Exterior photos of the sidewall. This is north facing. Next slide. This is the same north facing wall showing the wall abutting 5316 Barkwell, interior and exterior photos. Next slide. Additional exterior photos of the rear elevation. This is west facing. Next slide. Interior photos. The first main photo to the left is of the first floor deck caving into the basement. Top right photo is of the basement. And the bottom right photo, you can sort of see a cloud of dust or asbestos in the basement. Next slide. Additional interior photos. You can see the left main photo, the joints not connected to the bearing wall. On the right bottom photo, you can see the basement staircase gone, and the top right photo, again, those clouds of dust or asbestos. Next slide. Interior photos, this is a burnt beam in the basement. Next slide. Additional interior photos, again, in the basement. The main photo to the left is TSI asbestos scrap. You can see the scrap kind of in the center of the photo. On the right, you have, top right is the ductwork with asbestos. And again, more of that cloudy, dusty debris. Interior photos of the first floor of the building. Next slide. Next slide, please. Additional photos of the first floor and photos of the second floor. Next slide. And we can take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll move on to Landmark staff recommendations.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Carl, if you could just go through the next few slides. I think Crystal did a good job summarizing kind of the history of the property that we went through a bit more extensively last September when we looked at this. We appreciate Slavic Village's commitment to leaving this as green space for future development and not parking. So if a motion to approve is made, I think it should include, specifically that this not be parking. Staff would appreciate that. Generally, they took the comments and the requests that were made at our last meeting. They seem to have met them. And as you can see from the photos, and if any of you were at the site visit, I mean, this is it's in very bad condition. Roof is collapsed, first floor is collapsed into the basement. A lot of the joists don't connect to the pockets in the walls anymore. I'm not even sure how you'd go about rehabbing this. So unfortunately, I think, staff would recommend approval.
Okay, thank you for that summary. Should just leave it on. Based on the presentation previously and the presentation today, and specifically Landmark staff's recommendation, I'm in support of the demolition. Other questions and comments from the commission? Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree. The applicant has provided the additional information that we had requested from the original hearing. And I agree that given the current condition, this building unfortunately needs to be raised. I want the applicant to confirm what will happen with the basement area, confirm that the entire basement and basement slab would be removed, and that backfill required would be compacted, and that the space will be left as a green space for future development.
Yes, we do what we call a clean hole inspection, which is performed by the city, which it requires our contractors to remove all debris before, and then, having that visually inspected with the slab removed. We do, in cases such as this, leave portions of the foundation adjacent to the sidewalk to keep the sidewalk secure. There really aren't any foundations along Barkwell Avenue that would be necessary to support the alley, but those would be considered. The adjacent building at 1520 Broadway has a basement, but as I said, it is an older basement, so we would keep the foundation that is mortared to their basement as part of the waterproofing that was originally set up for that structure. But as far as the backfill, it would be clean. This is not scheduled to be compacted backfill, but it would be clean backfill and graded properly, and all in preparation for a nice green lawn.
Thank you.
And Beth Mackey with the city's demolition bureau. We're working with CCLRC in conjunction with this. So our inspectors would be party to the inspection. The retaining of certain foundational items for stability on roadways, walkways, and side adjacent structures are at their guidance based on their site conditions. They will dictate leave 3 foot, leave 6 foot based on their perception on stability for the community components immediately adjacent to it. We also do require, as does CCLRC, seed and straw. We do require, we no longer do grass seeding, so you are going to see a clover laid on it, which is in conjunction with enhancements that City of Cleveland has asked us. So what you'll see is in any demolition, whether it be individual or joint, we really work to make sure that what we do is in conjunction with other community partners and in keeping the site safety for everyone involved. So they'll be partnered to that as well.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you very much for that comprehensive response.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Other questions and comments from the commission? Not seeing any. Would someone like to make a motion? Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
That's right. Commission members, my name is David Roberts. I'm the Chief Assistant Director of Law for Code Enforcement, and I wanted to be here to advocate for this building being demolished. It doesn't sound like I need to push very hard to get to that result, but I do want to do a brief description of what law you're applying, because I may be here again, and I want us to be in agreement on what it is you're balancing. So I have a few copies, if anyone wants, of Cleveland Codified Ordinance 16105, Regulation of Environmental Changes, Certificate of Appropriateness. And what I want to point out is two interpretations that I don't know which of them you follow, given that I'm an advocate here today, so I'm not advising you. That's Ms. Lipscomb's role to advise you. But I want to point out, I think historically, when you get to 16105, it's going to be B2. There's a set of factors that you consider. I think these are all going to be familiar to you. Architectural historic significance of a building, the significance in relation to the environment, in the case of a moving of a building, whether that's feasible, the present and potential economic viability of the subject building or structure given its physical condition and marketability, if the demolition will remedy conditions imminently dangerous to life, health, or property, as determined in writing by the Department of Building Housing, and F, the appropriateness of the new structure and for use and impact on the community. So we've seen all those today. I realize I'm just reviewing this for you, but not economically viable. The letter from Taylor indicates that no one's going to fix this building and try to make money out of it. It obviously will remedy conditions that are dangerous to life and health. And you've indicated the appropriateness, not letting it be a parking lot, doing your best to make it better fit for the architecture of the community. Okay. Now, I want to point out to you, however, there's another way to interpret 16105. If you balance those factors without regard to the potential economic viability and declare that every structure you want to save it because it could be saved, because a subsidy could be arranged for it to be saved, then you'd be ignoring the marketability factor. And then I might argue to you that, in fact, those factors don't apply as a balancing test. I think historically, you've used those as a balancing test. I want to point out to you that paragraph C of the ordinance states as follows. If the commission finds One, I'm adding the one, but just to give you the syntax of this. One, that the environmental change proposed will not adversely affect any significant historical or aesthetic feature of the property and is appropriate and consistent with the spirit of this chapter. Or, all right, so that's one way for the applicant to succeed. Or, there's a second way for the applicant to succeed, which is that it will remedy conditions imminently dangerous to life, health, or property as determined in writing by the Department of Building and Housing or the Division of Fire or the Department of Public Health. So under that more building code centered version of the ordinance, you would only be asking if this has been declared a danger. And that would be enough. And Slavic Village would be entitled to say, this is such a danger, the building department agrees with us, and therefore the certificate of appropriateness must be issued. So I'm not urging you to adopt that today, but I'm suggesting to you that if the balancing that you've historically been doing under B2 leads you to say in virtually every case that you're not going to issue the certificate of appropriateness, then on behalf of the building department, I would push and perhaps appeal your decision to the Board of Zoning and the Common Pleas Court to establish that the correct interpretation of 16105 is that there's two routes, and that second route doesn't require balancing of any of those factors. So that's an issue for another day, but I wanted to raise it because it's come up before. And it may come up again. In this case, I think you're already of the opinion that the factors balanced do support the approval. So I look forward to your approving it.
Do we have that as part of our record? Those sections, or you already have it all? May I have a copy of that?
And just to indicate for the record as well, I imagine it's in the record, Chairperson Trott, but I've marked Inspector Catacouton's violation notice, which does indicate exactly the language in what.
Yes, yeah, we do have a copy of that. And I guess clarification, I understand your interpretation and your points. I just want to clarify for the commission today, we're just looking at this demo. We're not adopting one interpretation or another, so.
Agreed.
All right, well, thank you for that additional information. It's helpful to understand your position, and the law department's position.
Yeah.
Oh, I shouldn't say that. Yes.
So, just for the record, my name is Sarah Briscoe, and I'm also from the law department. Both myself and Chief Dave Roberts, we're both representative of the city, but we kind of have different capacities because we're in different sections. I want to make it clear that we're not. I make it clear that we're not in opposition here with each other, even though, in my capacity as representative of the Landmarks Commission, and his capacity as representative of Building and Housing, there are times where the interests may conflict. And I think that's a discussion that we will be having internally with the law department. But with respect to demolitions that are considered before this commission, ultimately, I think up until this date, the commission has been left to make that finding as provided in 16105, which, is really up to the commission to decide whether or not to issue the certificate of appropriateness, notwithstanding the standards there. Obviously, those should, and as mandated under the provision, should be considered and are required to be considered, but it's ultimately up to the commission to make a finding to issue or to deny a certificate of appropriateness as it relates to demolitions or alterations. And, in the event of a denial, the party has the option to appeal, as has been the case here. Just wanted to make that statement, so there's no confusion there.
Thank you for that clarification also. All right. To continue or move us forward, were there any additional questions or comments from the commission? Would someone like to make a motion? Mr. Dulick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve the demolition of this building with the requirement that it be changed to and maintained as green space, including the proposed traffic guard, as well as the confirm with City Department of Building and Housing appropriate backfill. I think that covered everything.
Would you consider adding the request by Landmark staff to state that the site cannot be used for parking?
Absolutely. Thank you.
So we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sandberry. We have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Brundges.
Just to add that they submit a final salvage plan as well.
Mr. Dulick, do you agree?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Bridges. That's great.
Mr. Sandberry, do you
Yes.
agree? All right, thank you, Mr. Brundges. So that has been added as a condition. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Musson, please call roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Dulick,
Yes.
Interim Director Fields,
Yes.
Councilmember Gray, Mr. Sandberry,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Trasick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Ms. Trott.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Well, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to our next applicants, located at 1911 West 30th Street, St. Ignatius High School, DeSanto Hall.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. My name is Richard Klingshirn, representing the owner of St. Ignatius High School, currently employed there. And we are back here now to talk about the signage plan for DeSanto Hall, a project that was previously approved and is underway. I do have virtually with me two representatives from the two different sign companies, Eric Kramer, ASI Signage, and Brandon Grisella from Pompili Precast, as well as our architect of record, Pat Highland, in case there are any questions that go beyond my scope of knowledge. And let's see. Okay, so this is basically a view from space that shows the site. So I'm going to come in a little bit closer here. And your clicker's not cooperating. Am I pointing at his computer? Just to orient then, this kind of shows the streets around there. So the site is outlined in yellow before we had begun demolition and construction. You can see Lorraine Avenue, West 28th Street. As we look at the different views, this will basically be, you can see there's no road fronting the project itself. That's our football field and track. And it will be visible westbound on Lorraine and from across the field on West 28th Street. This is really fickle. Pardon me?
There's a slight delay
Yeah.
on screen.
Got it. Okay, site plan, again, just per the requests and requirements. The gray outline is the actual building. The red bubble, this is from one of our drawings. The red bubble is the courtyard area, just to give you that perspective. This is current conditions, probably 3 weeks ago. We continue to make progress in spite of the lovely winter weather we've been having. Elevations, lower elevation is the east facade that we are talking about. The upper elevation, just for reference, is the north facing elevation of the building. There is no signage on the north elevation. And then we will take a look at the actual signage itself. So this is a rendering of the building, again, facing east. 3 elements of signage. The first two on the left, St. Ignatius High School in blue, are pinned aluminum painted letters. AMDG, which is the Jesuit motto, pinned aluminum letters in yellow. They don't really look yellow on the picture, but they are yellow. I do have samples here. And then etched into the precast is the name of the building, DeSanto Hall, right in the center. And then just to kind of come out a little bit, for full perspective here and transparency, you can see signage on the left, which is a building that already exists, Wasmer Field, and then above it is our seal. Below it says Gabor Track. That was put up about, I think about 2.5 or 3 years ago, and we had come through this commission for that approval as well. So I just wanted to make sure you saw the entire elevation of the east facade from 28th Street, and again from Lorraine Road westbound. So here's the kind of the detail on the first two elements from ASI signage. St. Ignatius High School, blue letters, those are 24 inches high. And then AMDG up on the building, those letters are 48 inches high. The St. Ignatius High School piece is about 20 feet up in the air. There is no, that's from grade, from the track basically in front of the building. The AMDG piece is about between 35 and 40 feet up in the air. So relatively high, and I think proportional and scale for the building. And then the etched, well, that's just one more piece. That's the elevation showing those components on there. And then this is the DeSanto Hall shop drawing. Again, this is etched into precast by Pompili and tinted. These letters, as you can see, they're about, the block is about 4.5 feet high. The letters are a little over 2.5 feet high. And those letters are about 35 feet in the air as well. So although the tinting looks relatively dark from the field, it's I think it's going to be appropriate. And then the rest of my presentation is simply getting into the detail of the DeSanto Hall piece from the shop drawings that I included. The final comment that I have, and I'm just going to go back to the one that's most visible, but the final comment is that, as we stated when we presented this building for approval, which was approved a while back, after 100 and almost 40 years of the city looking at our backside, as we like to say, we're very proud to be building a structure and proudly facing downtown Cleveland. So that concludes my presentation. I will gladly answer questions.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll then move on to the local committee's recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This project was reviewed by the Historic Ohio City Design Review Advisory Committee on February 20th. They were in support of the project, recommended approval as presented, and were appreciative of the thorough presentation.
All right, thank you. And Landmark staff recommendation?
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Landmark staff agrees with the local design review committee. Recommend approval as presented. With approval of any needed variances as well. We're not exactly sure what, if any, are needed. And also just appreciative that, like Mr. Klingshirn said, this is, finally kind of having the St. Ignatius face the city instead of always kind of having its back to us. So
Excellent.
definitely grateful for that.
Excellent, thank you. We'll then open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Yes, Mr. Samberry.
Madam Chair, there wasn't any in the presentation, but I just want to confirm, is there any lighting associated with the signage?
Thank you for that question. There is no lighting, no illumination.
Thank you, Mr. Samberry. Other questions and comments? I guess I will make my one comment. I think it's the facility is looking beautiful and it's going to be wonderful. I do appreciate that it's facing and providing a new front face to the city. My only question is, and it's not something that would cause me for objection, it just feels like a little bit of, it feels a lot of signage. St. Ignatius is so understated knowing that campus very well, because my son went there. It's very understated, you know, and here you have all of the different, elements associated with the logo. So that's my personal opinion. Like I said, I don't object to it, but I do think it's a lot of signage. My personal opinion would be to remove either the AMDG or the name of the school. I'm assuming the name of the school wants to be there for any of the photography that happens in that area. That's my personal opinion. I feel like it's a lot, but I still am in support of the project.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just basically echo your comments. This is such a handsome building, and it's going to totally change how people perceive the campus, especially driving westbound on Lorraine. I personally think that the size and the quantity of signage is appropriate. I don't have any problem with the coloration, and I just very much looking forward to the completion of this wonderful project. Thank you.
Other questions and comments thank you, Mr. Strickland. Sorry. Any other questions and comments from the commission? Would someone like to make a motion? Thank you, Ms. Anderson. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. We have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion?
I would just request that we add approval for any needed variances.
Thank you for that. Ms. Anderson, yes. Ms. Fields, do you support that
Yes.
condition? That a condition or a recommendation? Condition. All right. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. Mr. Musson, please call roll.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dreyer?
Yes.
Mr. Dulick?
Yes.
Interim Director Fields?
Yes.
Councilmember Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Sambry?
Yes.
Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Trasick?
Yes.
Dr. Williams?
Yes.
And Ms. Trout?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Congratulations. We look forward to seeing it complete. We'll now move on to our next applicants located at 2742-82 Van Auken Boulevard, the demolition. Good morning. If you hit the button before you speak.
Great, thank you very much. My name is Joe Del Balso, and I work for Perrin Management. We represent the Bonwood Teller LLC building located at 2742 to 2782 Van Auken, and we are seeking your approval to demolish the single-story retail building. Next slide, please. Oh, perfect, thank you. Okay, perfect. Oh, perfect. What you'll see here is an aerial view of the building to be demolished. We recognize them as buildings 3 and 4. You'll see they're located right along Van Auken at the southeast corner of the Shaker Square district. Okay, you'll see building 3 was the first built building built back in 1939. It's a 26,000 square foot single story retail building. Building 4 built in 1979 is 8,320 square feet. Again, just an aerial view of the exterior buildings that we are looking to and asking your permission to demolish. At this time, the building has been cleared of all hazardous materials, and we have been granted brownfield funding to proceed with to assist us in our funding to take down this building. This is just a topo survey of the site, just to give, and this will come into play as we Once the building has come down, we've been ordered a SWEP plan to make sure that the stormwater management is going to be taken care of on the site once the building comes down. And these next few slides are just a series of photos showing the general conditions of the building. You'll find that the building itself has just become structurally unsound at this point. We've got a parking deck that is literally collapsing into the building, unfortunately. Again, just a more series of photos. We actually had one of the exterior walls up on the parking deck that collapsed just from the wind itself one day, unfortunately. Again, just a more series of photos showing the general condition of the building. That's the ramp that leads on the far right. That's the ramp that leads up to the parking deck that is collapsing. Just more photos of the overall site. This is an overall site plan from our Alta survey. We've highlighted the areas that would be coming down. This building sits on its own parcel. The overall site that's owned by Bonwood Teller owns 3 parcels on this overall site. We'll call it buildings. For our purposes, we'll just call them buildings 3 and 4, which are the ones that are coming down. And then there's a building at the hard corner of Shaker and Van Aken, where the management offices have been for 25 plus years and will continue to remain there. So that portion of the building of that site would remain. There's also an overflow parking lot off of Drexmore Road that would be used for future parking. Per the recommendation of design review from our meeting on the 18th, the salvage plan that we did determine is there is some bulkheads that run along the lower section of the building that could, if hopefully taken off very carefully, we could recycle those bulkheads and reuse them on the 2720 building. As far as any other, our demo contractor, Site Tech, they retain all the other salvage rights, but there really isn't much of any value other than scrap that remains in the rest of the building. As far as concept drawings are concerned, again, from our perspective at this point, our focus is on the demolition. And we are marketing the project of this particular site. It's a 1.7 acre site to be redeveloped for multifamily housing. During the interim time, again, you'll see, I know we've showed a proposed parking lot. That's not the intention of it. You'll see a proposed grass area, and you'll also see just one of our variations of plans for the multi-residential building. The proposed grass area that also surfaced out of our design review meeting as far as recommendations of what to do with the site in the interim, which we have no objections to. We don't really have a transition plan at this time as far as other than the site being marketed toward multifamily development. We had interested parties that are interested in the site, including the ownership group themselves participating. But at this point, our focus is on the demolition. The property is currently in housing court right now because of the condition of it. We need to get the property out of housing court so we could transition to the next step. And we've really determined the only way out of housing court is to get the building down. And again, this is just a copy from our SWEP plan that shows that, even on the plan, they too recommended that the area be a grassed area. So it transitions for proper runoff on the site. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We will now move on to local design review committee recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This project was reviewed by the Greater Cuyahoga Valley Historic Design Review Advisory Committee on the 18th. There was a lot of discussion about understanding the future reuse of the site and the hope for the redevelopment for residential, and also about the importance of the grassy lot and not a parking lot, as some parking lots are temporary and then they just continue on for decades. And some of the committee members mentioned that there is a bowling alley on the site, and so having proper grading and backfill is important in those basement areas, and that landscaping or like shrubbery or trees along the perimeter for pedestrian beautification or to improve the pedestrian experience in that interim time would be appreciated. Ultimately, they did recommend the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of the buildings outlined, and a request for a landscaping plan with plantings and grass to be submitted. And as the applicant noted, the salvage of those bulkheads to be reused on the corner building.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to public comment received.
So public comment was shared with the commission members, but we did receive one letter from Cleveland Neighborhood Progress stating support for the demolition, and that one quote from this letter was, "We believe that by expediting the demolition of the strip center and parking lot, a longtime nuisance will be eliminated and opened up for new development opportunities. The retention of the Bonwit Teller building allows for the historic nature and continuity of the building fabric and of the surrounding neighborhood to be maintained." And that letter was shared with the commission members prior to this meeting.
All right, thank you. And then we'll move on to Landmark staff recommendations.
And thank you, Madam Chair. Staff essentially agrees with the local design review advisory committee's recommendations. Unfortunately, it seems like the decision in the early 1950s to park on the roof of this building is ultimately what condemned it. It just, took us a while to get here. I did want to note that regarding future development, this is a heavily planned area, like with very, very intentional design. You can see this article from 1928 up on the screen that just talks about the importance of symmetry and the, I guess, traditional English styles of building. Tudor and Georgian in particular. So I think keeping that in mind as you think about, or a future developer thinks about the site, is going to be kind of critically important to coming up with a plan that works, and staff is happy to work with you through that process.
We appreciate that.
But ultimately, the building it's essentially obsolete. Even bringing it back online to add more retail to an area that's struggling to fill retail spaces seems a bit counterproductive to our historic district, which, the focus is really of the square and the ancillary buildings. And this is considered one of those ancillary buildings, certainly contributes to the district, but it's just kind of beyond its salvageable life, in our opinion.
Thank you. Is there a summary that would like to be given from the the site visit?
We went through, I think, all of the units during the site visit. As noted, there are a lot of basements. I think all of the units have a basement, bowling alley in some of them. I think an old article said there was planned to have bowling alleys in all the basements, but maybe never quite got there. Some interesting old cut throughs. You can see that sort of arched area there. Those are kind of two arcaded cut throughs that went from the front of the building to the parking in the rear. The roof was covered in snow when we went on our site visit, so you couldn't really see the, level of damage up there, but I think just common sense tells you enough asphalt on top of a building to park cars on probably isn't gonna help a structure for a building that wasn't meant to support that kind of load, especially with modern cars and the weight that they currently are. A lot of soft spots in the floors, but generally it's in poor condition. As Mr. Blas said, structurally unsound, I would say at this point, just given the load it's bearing.
All right, thank you for that summary. We'll then open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Who'd like to start us off?
like to start off.
Councilman Gray?
Thank you. Just want to say that I lived in this area for a long, long time, and I remember when this particular area was one of the most beautiful, inspiring, busy areas back in the day. And just over time, time change, people change, demographic change, area change, but also working with Joe. They call you Joe, and also Mr. Sharam, working with them over time in this position and just understanding the process of what happened and what is needed for this area now is for the community and for the future, and to see this historical building deteriorated like it did. It is time for it to go and for us to look into the future to have it, have something there, we built for a multi-purpose apartment unit, for that area, because we are growing that particular area as well. So, just to say that I have been in conversations with them since I've been in this position. So just to understand the process, of now what is needed, it is needed. So I support the demolition that is needed and also the process for us to move forward, of what to come. So thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Other questions and comments from the commission? Oh, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also toured Councilwoman Gray and the staff. I toured the building, and I agree that it is in a very dilapidated state and it needs to come down. I have a question. Is this part of the Shaker Square that's owned by like a Burton Bell Car?
It's a separate ownership.
It's separate
Yeah.
ownership.
Yep, Bonwit Teller LLC is the owner of the property.
Okay.
And they own the 3 parcels.
Okay.
This is the center parcel.
Okay, so this is something different. 2 things. First of all, whatever does get built there, I think you need to take careful consideration of the plan for that entire Shaker Square area. And I'm in agreement with Mr. Musson that needs to be totally the focus on the design needs to be incorporate that plan. The other thing I wanted to mention is when I was at the site with Councilwoman Gray, she had talked about all the deteriorated apartment buildings on South Moreland, and I think in order for that neighborhood to be viable and for that community to move forward, the focus needs to be on rehabbing the buildings that are there.
True.
That's something that I think that's where resources should go primarily, is to renovate that. And I realize that you're a private developer, you can do what you want, but I think that if there's new construction that's not tied in with the upgrading and renovation of the existing, I don't think it's good for either.
A thriving area is good for everyone.
Right.
And we believe that, and we see ourselves as a part of the square. So even though we're a different ownership and disconnected, we have ties to the square, and we want to complement and be a part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Other questions and comments from the commission? I'll just echo what Ms. Anderson said. I think this is such a area that has been a focus of the city in both attention and their hearts.
Yes.
For so many years. Paying close attention to however this site moves forward is critical for the rebirth of this area, and attention to the scale and the architectural character of the area will allow that future redevelopment to be successful.
Great.
Other questions and comments from the commission? Would someone like to put forward a motion?
Yes, make a motion to approve as presented.
Do you accept or will you agree to incorporate the conditions that were recommended?
Yes.
Of not using the site for parking in the interim until redevelopment?
Yes.
And a
absolutely.
salvage plan be submitted to staff?
Yep.
All
I
right, so
do.
we have a motion with conditions. Do we have a second?
Second.
Oh,
A second.
and so, so we do have a second. Thank you,
Second.
Councilman Gray. And then we'll open the floor for additional comments.
I had a question. I don't think necessarily a requirement, but would the folks be okay with the requirement to present a landscape plan for the green space, the materials, and to recommend that some form of landscaping be put on the street lines?
Anderson, wait, I'm sorry, Ms. Fields. Do you agree with that additional recommendation?
I do.
And Councilman Gray? Okay, so you agree with those additional condition? Any further questions or comments? Great, not seeing any. Mr. Muffin.
Sorry. Could you
What was the-
clarify if that landscaping plan was a recommendation or a condition?
I think submitting the plan as a condition and the recommendation is essentially more than just over or whatever the current is.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, then Mr. Muslim, please call roll.
And Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Dulick,
Yes.
Interim Director Fields,
Yes.
Councilmember Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Sambry,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Trassick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Ms. Trout.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you all very
Thank
much for
you.
the time.
Good luck.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to our next applicant located 1422 West 74th Street, Watterson Lake Apartments. I'd like to welcome the applicant to announce yourself and tell us about your project.
Yes.
Hello.
Go ahead, Derek. I'll get us started. I would like to say hello. Thank you to the Landmarks Commission for this opportunity to present our project. My name is Derek Tillman. I am the developer for Watterson Lake Apartments. If we can go to the next slide.
One moment. I think we had a technical issue on the slides. Give us a second. Yes, we're back.
Okay, great. So just briefly, high level, the project has went through a pretty robust process to get the project as well as the designs to this point. We're very excited about that, as well as to share more details about it in a few moments. Briefly, the project went through an RFP process issued by the city. We've had various levels of engagement with the city, as well as with Councilwoman Spencer. We've had a lot of community engagement meetings, have met with Landmarks Commission staff, funders, and a host of others. We feel like we've done a good job of synthesizing all of that input to really come up with the best project as it stands to date. And we remain committed to being a good community partner, as well as really just a good developer as hopefully as the project moves forward. So with that, it looks like the presentation went away, but with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jeremiah to walk through some more of our slides and the presentation in general.
Thanks, Derek. Jeremiah Brooks with Stantec Architecture, working with Derek on this project for over the last year. As you mentioned, we did lose the visual of the slides. I'll speak through just a couple of the first ones as we get this back online. The second slide was just a culmination of all the partners that we have. in the project, from development and management through architectural and engineering. And the commitment that this team has given to the project over the last year, and how it's grown and kind of reacted as different items come up. We can go to the third slide when it's available.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, we're having a little, we're continuing to have a little technical issues here in the room. So give us one moment and we'll try to get the slides up.
Okay, understood. Thank you. All right.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
All right, we're having a little bit of bandwidth issues here, so bear with us, but please proceed with your presentation.
No worries. Thank you. We'll try and get through a lot of information here quickly for everyone. So this was the RFP that we responded to. We submitted a concept for this, in which it was awarded. And over the next couple of slides, we'll kind of talk about the site itself, the evolution of the project, and where it stands today. Next slide, please. So as we're advancing, just to reiterate, the location of this project is on Detroit Avenue between 74th and 75th Street at the former location of the Watterson Lake School. That school was demolished in preparation for the RFP. And here are some contextual images of the surrounding site and the vacant parcel as it was presented to the development team. Next slide. As Derek had mentioned, over the past year, we've been in front of the advisory board and landmarks committee. This will be our third time. We've also met with the community several times to hear their feedback, and really appreciate the feedback we've received to date, and have incorporated a lot of the commentary. And we believe that this project has become better throughout the course of this discussion. Next slide. So this is the project as it stands today. Along Detroit Avenue, we do have our 5-story mass. This is one of the bigger moves we've made over time. Was we previously had the building set back. We've now brought the face of the building to complete kind of the city wall in the context of that existing block between 74th and 75th. And separated that mass slightly and differentiated as it turns the corner to 74th, where we do step everything back from the property lines in more of that residential realm. And then tried to locate the vast majority of the building kind of center to the site, again, trying to keep it back from the property lines and respecting the context and pedestrian experience on 74th, 75th, and then throughout the site. This project consists of the multifamily building on Detroit that is 5 stories tall. It has a mixed-use residential along Detroit that we'll get into a little bit later. We do have some site features that extend the Clinton Avenue as a walking path and some community amenities for both the residents of the development as well as the surrounding community. and the incorporation of some townhomes for a diversity of living within this development, and some surface parking to alleviate the demand of adjacencies. Next slide, please. This is contextual overall. Our project being here in the center, it's topping out at 60 feet. It is larger, but we feel as though it's contextual as far as some other larger buildings within the size and scale, adjacent and mixed throughout the community. Next slide. This is our site plan. And again, we'll walk through it from Detroit back. So along Detroit in the blue mass, that is our retail component that faces Detroit and turns the corner on 74th, trying to preserve and extend some of the retail components that already exist along Detroit. As we come back along 74th, at the termination of Clinton Avenue in the site, that's where we've located our entrance to the residential component of the building. So we'll have a residential lobby. And also along 74th, we do have 6 townhouses to tie into the existing kind of fabric and layout of that street. At that termination of Clinton Avenue, our property has a small plaza for the entry. We do incorporate a walking path that bisects our property from 74th to 75th. And along that walking path, we have some amenities that include both some gathering areas closer to 74th with some picnic tables and paved areas, a small lawn area, and then what is in the brown, we'll touch a little later, is a playground area designated as each one of these items references back to community requests and development of that RFP that we responded to provide areas for not only the residents of this project, but also the community at large. And then along 75th Street, we have a third face of the building that is our community center that will be available to both residents and then to the community as well. Through the evolution of this project, we have balanced a lot of items, specifically the parking, green space, and playground. We've tried to juggle as many things as we can and feel as though that this iteration has best addressed most of the comments we've received to date at a good balance with the project itself. Next slide, please. Just to touch quickly on this is along Detroit Avenue. These are the proposed 3 tenants that currently the development team is working with. Would be a new restaurant on the corner, as well as a small coffee shop and some retail, or some office spacing as well. So there would be smaller retail and a diverse mix to introduce along Detroit. Next slide. The playground area that we had proposed, again, this is between kind of the townhomes and the multifamily building at that pedestrian extension of Clinton Avenue that bisects the site. We are proposing replacing the previous playground structures that were associated with the school that the community had used. We looked at what those structures were and replacing in kind as far as the different elements and the children that count that were those previous structures could support. So we're making sure that we're putting back playground, newer, more contextual for the site, some more muted tones, natural wood elements of that nature. But we also wanted to make sure that the size of the area would not diminish what was previously there by any means. So that way it could support both the new development as well as be an amenity for the neighborhood. Next slide. In reference to that site and the wood elements of the playground itself, those want to be continued throughout. All the site elements, benches, tables, gathering areas that I had mentioned earlier, and the landscaping that we are proposing would be native species and pre-approved from Cleveland standards. So that way we have a very naturalistic walk that provides, you know, safe but also beautiful borders to the playground, the site itself, and make that pedestrian walk through from 74th to 75th, you know, a nice pedestrian experience. And next slide. Stormwater management process, we are providing retention within the limits of the site, just from a technical aspect. Next slide is also just one of our technical drawings talking about the lighting that we have for the site to ensure that it is lit and safe for both that pedestrian walk through the parking areas as well as the playground. Next slide. We come to elevations along Detroit. So this is the main elevation along Detroit. For this particular mass of the building, we're using 2 stories of brick masonry. And then 3 levels of a cement board paneling system above with a modest cornice, trying to you know, take note of what had previously been there, what's contextual around the site, while introducing a newer modern building that kind of notes to it. So as we go through the next few slides, the rendered images of that and how we see this building contextually fitting into the block. We're going with a buff brick to tie into the savings and loan building on the opposite corner. I felt that was a nice companion building, complementary colors, add a brick module, and then our warmer muted cement board will be a board and batten that we'll get into in a few slides as well. On the brick masonry along the front face, we did take note of some of the banding that was on the old Waterson Lake and reinterpreted some of those soldier coursing and making sure that we incorporate a lot of reveals and context and depth to those masonry facades to ensure some visual interest in keeping with you know, the architectural character of the neighborhood. Next slide. This is along 74th. So as we turn that corner, our brick masonry base does reduce to 1 story. And then the cement board paneled residential is then pushed back. So our brick masonry continues closer to the property line, whereas the cement board residential portion of it is pushed back about 20 feet from the property line. So to give a little bit of relief at that pedestrian walk experience. Next slide. So again, this is just a rendered view from the corner of 74th and Detroit Avenue. As 74th comes into Detroit, it does come in at not quite a 90-degree angle. So we did cut the building back a little bit just to be able to preserve some views for, you know, traffic concerns and to alleviate that corner in the massing. Next slide. Again, just additional elevations as we turn the corner. This is what would be visible from interior to the parcel, from say the playground or the parking lot. And again, it's that more residential scale of 1-story brick masonry. So that way we've always got a high quality, abuse resistant material along the pedestrian path just for longevity. And then the 4 stories of cement board above. Next slide. So speaking of that pedestrian corridor, this is a view from Clinton Avenue where it kind of terminates into 74th. On the right is our multifamily building with the lobby that faces that, and then to the left, kind obscured a little bit by the street trees that we're proposing would be the townhouses associated with this. But the straight view on would be our amenity spaces with the pedestrian path that bisects the site. In that small gathering or entry plaza for the residential component, we do have some seating areas as well as some wayfinding that we're incorporating for the transit-oriented development. Next slide. Again, just additional elevations. There's kind of a lot of sides of this building as it snakes through the site. Next slide. And some additional renderings for kind of the look and feel of the project. Starting at the top left, we are noting that street trees are removed for clarity. But this is, again, a view from 74th that captures the townhouses on the left with the multifamily, on the right with our pedestrian throughway, playground, and amenity areas. On the to the top right, again, just additional views that would be from the entry plaza, from the multifamily building, looking back at the playground in that lawn space. Bottom left-hand corner would be from 75th, looking back at the site with the parking lot on the right. And the bottom right-hand corner is a view from 75th, looking at the community room entry and space. Next slide. First floor plan of the multi-story built or multifamily building. Again, we're incorporating the retail along Detroit. As we come back, we have incorporated over time some walkout units, so that way at street level and at the site amenities side, that there are more street-facing residential units, more eyes on the street, so to speak, and our main lobby there that also incorporates internal bike storage, has an office for leasing, and site management to be there as well, loading and storage areas, and all the necessary items for the building to function. Next slide. A typical upper floor of the building. Again, this is just to reference that we do have a good mix of 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units for a variety of family needs. And each floor also has a small community gathering space or other amenity for the residents. Next slide. Cross section through the site, and again, this was to kind of illustrate along 74th. While we do have the footprint of the building slightly set back from the property line, when we get to the taller mass of the building, we really did pull that back. Again, trying to not crowd the pedestrian experience and kind of alleviate the size of this building on the surrounding community. Next slide. These are elevations of our townhome developments. Again, early on, we had a 3-story option that we've now reduced to 2 stories, trying to tie more into the context of the adjacent homes, as well as changing the kind of architectural language of those buildings and roof lines to be more traditional, as opposed to kind of square top modern that we had originally proposed. Next slide. And from 74th, again, just capturing those townhomes. As we further develop those, we wanted to incorporate a lot of contextual but reimagined elements of the adjacent architecture. So we felt as our front porches, were necessary, some pitched roofs, things of that nature. Through the requirements of the project itself, front porches, unfortunately, were not able to be elevated just due to accessibility concerns and at a visitable first floor in all the units. But we did want to maintain a masonry water table to kind of reference those, foundations and elevated foundations. Next slide. Overview of the townhomes. Again, these townhomes are a mix of 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, and 4 bedrooms with visitable first floors. We can skim through the next 2 slides are the typical floor plans of each. And our final slide is our materials board. And again, that masonry base to the building on the lower right of the screen. We're looking at using a lot of reveals and projections, and then the upper portions of the building, we are looking at using a board and batten cement board product. Black double hung windows, sliding doors. Our railing system is also on there to kind of minimize the color palette while making it a little bit more of a traditional warm colors as requested by community groups. The elevation sections there on the left-hand side. The far left is the typical residential tower that would be visible on 74th and the Thruway and 75th. Again, with our storefront for some of the retail components and entryways, and then a traditional double hung window and sliders with our either Juliet balconies and or cantilevered balconies for the residences. Would like to point out that the first 3 stories of the board and batten would be kind of a cream color with the battens at 24 inches on center. And then when we hit to the 5th floor, that accent color of the dried eucalyptus is what we've proposed, would be slightly set back as well to create a further depth. And then the battens would be at 12 inches on center, again, to create a little bit of architectural diversity. We felt that this is kind of an element as far as the foundation, building, roof elements as we've masked this building out. And the section to the right of that is along Detroit, where we have the 2 levels of masonry, a little bit more ornate as far as reveals and projections, and then a single color with massing the windows together. Again, double hung, our residence is above this, and then a complementary cornice piece to cap the mass along Detroit. So thank you for listening and giving us the opportunity to present again. And looking forward to questions and comments.
So
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, 1 second. We're still figuring out the mics are having an issue.
Okay.
All right. Well, then we'll use both mics. Thank you for the presentation. Then we move on to the design review advisory committee recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This project was reviewed by the Historic West Cleveland Design Review Advisory Committee on February 19th. There was a lot of discussion at that meeting with our committee members. Some of the items that they focused on or talked about was the importance of the green space and tree lawn along the street on 74th, shade trees and varied species, as well as the one retention basin that's located in the green space area could impact the future of the trees. And so movement of that to somewhere where trees won't be disturbed would be important. Then the louvers that are included on the sides and rear, I guess everything except the Detroit facade, could be painted to match the siding and not stand out as much. They're painted darker, they're rendered darker currently. Importance of building lighting, not just site lighting, but actually like building lighting or sconces could be appropriate. Discussion on appreciation from the committee on changes to materials that were made based on previous discussions, and discussion on the amount of density, that possibly less stories or 4 in the rear may be more fitting. The townhomes not necessarily fitting with the neighborhood or their design not fitting with the neighborhood. The main entry at 74th and West Clinton could be difficult for maneuvering around the site for people and vehicles, for dropping people off, picking people up, and importance of care to not impact the neighboring building on Detroit because it is very tight to the property line. And that is, a historic building along Detroit and should be, care taken to not impact that and kind of give it a little more breathing space. They made a motion for the recommendation of a certificate of appropriateness with conditions for building lighting to be included and study, like sconces and warm lighting, for long-lived shade trees to be used wherever possible, and the stormwater tanks relocated to under the parking lot to not impact tree growth, as well as strong considerations for the east and south elevations, I guess, and the west elevation studied for density and if, it could be reduced in some way, as well as study of the townhomes or opportunities for additional green space on the site, the introduction of tree lawns wherever possible on the site, as well as the louver details to paint and match the siding. Ultimately, that recommendation was a tied motion with 3 members in opposition to it and 3 in favor. I'll pass to Dan to follow up with that.
Yeah, if I can just, I guess, clarify that a little bit. There's a motion with conditions, a motion to approve with conditions made. It tied, as Jessica said, 3-3. At the commission level, the law department tells us that we would treat that as essentially a denial of a certificate of appropriateness. But since this is a advisory committee, I offered them the opportunity to kind of recraft another motion that might sway some people one way or another. Ultimately, the 3 votes that were against the recommendation for the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness, the issues that they had were sort of, I think, too fundamental with the project. They had to do with like scaling, mass, density, that sort of thing. So ultimately, there were no other motions made, and we ended up with no approved motion since a tie is not an approval. But we did, I guess we wanted to share the feedback that they all shared during the meeting, which Jessica's just summarized.
All right, thank you. Then move on to the public comments received.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we did not receive any requests for public comment. We do have Councilmember Spencer here to give her comment, but I can give a summary of what we've received from the public. We received, as kind of a previous thing, 11 comments were received from the October viewing after our deadline. And so we just want to kind of put those in the motion. They were included in the public comment that we had in the folder available for our commission members. We received 11 comments emailed by the deadline of the February 19th design review meeting. And so those were summarized for that meeting, and they'll be included in the summary here. And then we received 23 emailed comments by the deadline for this meeting. We did receive 1 comment after the deadline for this meeting as well. And so kind of a summary of these comments that have been received for this project, especially for this most recent iteration, is in opposition to the project. There's the frontage of the townhome should fit the neighborhood aesthetic. Trees planted should be shade trees or should be chosen for longevity or survivability. Slide. Significant impact to the neighboring building along Detroit and the buried foundation could have structural impacts. Design does not contribute to the architectural diversity or pay homage to the context of the neighborhood. Board and batten siding is not appropriate for the neighborhood or match the context. And the lack of sustainable elements or energy systems to reduce cost of maintenance. Parking not sufficient for the site, and street parking already limited in that area. Design is against the character of the neighborhood and does not contribute or add to the neighborhood aesthetic. Design not in line with the RFP, and there's community concerns and expectations for the density and lack of green space, and the insufficient parking are not in line with community needs. Congestion at the intersection of West Clinton and West 74th would be increased with the new development and the main entrance focus on that spot. There's concern on management and care of the buildings and the site once complete. The massing and modern appearance of the site is not in line with the neighboring historic homes. Reduction of height or design that blends into the neighborhood would be preferred, or more green space preferred as well. The vehicular entry and exit on West 74th has concern with pedestrians, cyclists, and children walking by to access the main entry, parking, public transportation, and playground, and adds an added burden to the residential historic district next door, I guess neighboring. The playground size not adequate for the density and neighborhood needs. Large massing of the development would overwhelm the neighborhood with size. higher noise levels, and added traffic and safety concerns for pedestrians. Noise and traffic concern study requested. Playground and green space is more preferred with accessible or additional options for all ages should be prioritized. A lack of context portrayed in the presentations and lack of transparency with the project and developer through design phases and question on process followed. Parking not sufficient for the residents, commercial use, and community use. And for both this meeting and the design review meetings, the West Clinton Block Club stated support for growth and development, but the project presented had issues in the high density, lack of green space, inadequate parking, and traffic and safety management concerns. We did receive comments in support of the project as well. The comments in support stated the style and scale was appropriate. They supported the colors and location of the townhomes on West 74th. They supported the attempt to accommodate the community concerns and balance with the project requirements, and the high quality affordable housing proposed had a thoughtful design that fit with the eclectic architecture of the area. They liked the green space and the playground provided. They supported that retail along Detroit and the appropriate density and the walkability of the site, the inclusivity and affordability, and alternative to market rate housing, as well as future community improvements as a result, such as more bus routes and further revitalization of the area.
All right, thank you for that summary. We'll then move on to Councilman Spencer, correct? For your summary? Okay, yes, Councilman Spencer.
At the mic. Good morning, everybody. It's really an honor to address you today. For those I haven't met, I'm Jenny Spencer, and I represent Ward 15 on Cleveland City Council. I also live just a few blocks away from this site, so I walk by it almost every day. This project is a big deal for my community because it is a large tract of publicly owned land. So this has long been considered a really rare opportunity. I did submit a letter to your attention, and although I do not want to repeat it word for word, for the benefit of the listening public and also those assembled, I would like to begin my comments by sharing some context and background. The Watterson Lake site has been made available for redevelopment through a land swap between the City of Cleveland and Cleveland Metropolitan School District for a portion of Cadell Commons Park in the Cadell neighborhood. This commission is also very familiar with the Marion C. Seltzer School project at Cadell Commons, so these are interrelated. In February 2023, the city released a request for proposals for this Watterson Lake site, and in September 2023, selected Bridging the Gap LLC to redevelop the site. I have personally maintained a project website, WattersonLakeClee.com, throughout this process in order to communicate with the public and provide maximum transparency. There were only 2 responses to the city's 2023 RFP. The alternate proposal was for a traditional 9% low-income housing tax credit project with a large surface parking lot behind the building. That developer, although local and reputable, failed to provide any publicly accessible green space or play space as specified in the RFP. Bridging the Gap's proposal was more ambitious in scope, but included commitments to include green space and play space. My true north throughout this process and the core goal of the RFP has been to provide badly needed affordable housing for our community, and for this not to become another luxury development site. In my view, the secondary core goal of the RFP was to provide common space and publicly accessible green space, something our community has insisted on for years. As you will see from the letter submitted, there is not community consensus around support for this project. I would like to take a moment to address one of the community's primary concerns right away, since it is not under the purview of Landmarks Commission: the question of property management for this building. I want to reassure members of the public that the City of Cleveland will not proceed with legislation to provide site control to the developer until there is a high-quality property management agreement in place. I also want to reassure members of the public that I agree that traffic safety is a huge issue. And I would ask the developer to collaborate with the city of Cleveland to ensure thoughtful right-of-way improvements that both calm traffic and provide safe pedestrian passage. I've made several requests to the city's traffic commissioner for the further study of West 74th Street, the intersection of West 74th and West Clinton, and the intersection of West 74th and Detroit Avenue. If possible, I would ask that Landmarks Commission emphasize the need for the city to make right-of-way improvements in your motion today. I will focus the remainder of my comments on the site plan, but before I do, I want to mention one other recurring concern I have heard from the community and that you heard Jessica repeat today, which is in regards to the massing of this building. The community has clearly stated that this project feels very dense and they would prefer a stepping down of the massing as it transitions from Detroit Avenue to West Clinton. I will also note that because of the wrapping nature of this project, there is no real backside to this building, as all angles of the structure, all facades will be visible from both the Gorham Square Historic District and the Franklin West Clinton Historic District. I want to make a few comments on the site plan. I do want to thank the developer for participating in a community meeting on January 29th. I was opposed to the site plan as presented a month ago, and I feel much more comfortable with the current site plan iteration. That said, there is still some more work to do. I would note that the wedge-shaped common space on the site, consisting of both play space and passive green space, is meant to be welcoming and open to not only tenants of this building, but to the entire community. Because community concerns have focused so heavily on issues such as massing and traffic, I have not received community feedback about the design and usability of those spaces. I would flag for the commission the feedback submitted by Andrew Sargent, who is a member of the Cleveland City Planning Commission, who happens to be in the audience today. He is a place-based design expert. That said, I would appreciate one more opportunity for focused study of the common space as part of this approval process. Second, quality of life issues and peaceful coexistence between tenants and existing neighborhood residents must be paramount. As one example, my letter highlights the need for a well thought out pickup and drop off area adjacent to the main tenant entry. Finally, trees should not be an afterthought. I would consider any discussion of tree plantings today to be a placeholder until such time that our Urban Forestry Division can take a deeper look at species selection, maintenance plans, and satisfactory soil volume for planting. This project has come a long way, but let's make it the best it can possibly be. I will leave it at that, and I look forward to the Commission's comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Spencer. We'll then move on to Landmark staff recommendations.
I think, Madam Chair, before Landmark shares its thoughts, we have Nate Lowell, the neighborhood planner for the area, who can, I guess, provide some feedback from his point of view.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, commission members. We're still in the morning. Yes. So my name is Nate Lowell. I'm the Far West Side City Planner for the City of Cleveland. And have been engaged in this process since I started about a year and a half ago. I was going to touch on community engagement, but I think the councilwoman did a really good job on discussing the engagement that's gone into this project. It's been over 4 years in the making now, just from the RFP to the the selection of the developer. There was a lot of engagement work done before we selected a developer for this site to ensure that the project we were getting is a project that is good for the city, good for the residents, and good for the neighborhood. And so really, I wanted to highlight that there were three themes that emerged through the engagement that we did in the neighborhood. The first one was maintaining and increasing diversity in the neighborhood, both economically and racially. I think the project today that we have really does a good job of that. Maintaining access for the community through play and green space, which is noted to be included in the project and has gone through several iterations. And then the third aspect of promoting and increasing sustainability. And I want to just mention too that this project is located in our transportation demand management zone. And so this is a sort of a high density, transit oriented corridor on Detroit Avenue. It's a 15-minute bus ride to downtown Cleveland, which is our main job hub in the entire region. And so we feel that density is very appropriate on Detroit Avenue and feel that this, the residents and tenants of this development will not all have cars necessarily, especially because they are providing affordable housing and will have to provide alternative methods of transportation access to their tenants through our TDM program, we call it. I also just wanted to highlight the traffic concerns that we've heard throughout the community at a number of community meetings. I just wanted to state for the record that we as city planning staff are committed to working with the developer to ensure that the questions around pickup and drop off are safe and the safety of the street, specifically West 74th entrance, is addressed. And we can also work on, with the developer and with the traffic commissioner for the city to ensure the development does not cause any adverse impact to the existing residents. I also wanted to say that, generally speaking, in terms of the land use of the project, what was formerly there was a school, which was obviously very traffic intensive at 2 times a day, 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. for pickup and drop off. The development proposed really should disperse that traffic and be less of a constant concern at those times, and traffic will be more dispersed throughout the day. Other than that, I really just wanted to emphasize that we as city planning, we've seen a lot of rapid growth in this neighborhood and understand that there's a lot of concern amongst residents, due to having more people living around them and the potential challenges of coexisting in the neighborhood. But we've really seen in this neighborhood a lot of high-end developments, and that's because it's a walkable, transit-oriented, and vibrant neighborhood that people desire to live in. So to combat basically the pressures on housing and affordable housing in this neighborhood, we feel very strongly that if units are not created to meet the demand, that housing costs are going to continue to increase in this neighborhood. And just with concern to the the reduction of units or the stepping down of the units in the rear. This project was awarded an OFA 9% tax credit, which is a very competitive tax credit awarded by the state. So reducing the unit count at this point would jeopardize the viability of the project. And it also aligns very much, like I said, with the goals of the city to create a 15-minute city for our residents that everybody can walk, take transit to where they need to safely and accessibly. So with that, I just wanted to state city planning support for the project, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess before you step away, just some clarification about the 9% or looks like Councilwoman Spencer is yeah. I'm just want some clarification on.
Thank you, Nate. That was really helpful. I wanted to simply clarify, as somebody who's been studying this project a long time, if I'm not mistaken, I know for a fact this is not a 9% project. This is a 4% project, so it's not a competitive project. It also received funding from the state through a brand new mechanism called OLITEC, Ohio Low Income Housing Tax Credits, also 4%. These were not competitive. The developer has stated that the unit count is locked in. I am not a developer. I am not familiar with 4% tax credits. I'm not familiar with negotiations with OFA and how those might go. So I cannot definitively state one way or another whether this unit count is locked in. The developer does state that it is, but I wanted to clarify, this is a 4% project using a brand new tool that the state offered and to which many projects were awarded. This is not a 9% competitive project.
If I could just provide a little, clarification to both of those comments just made. Councilwoman Spencer is correct. This is not a 9% tax credit project. It's a 4%. We were awarded 4% tax credits, which are non-competitive. However, the state tax credits are competitive. And the project was also awarded OLITEC. That is competitive, similar to the 9% tax credit process. So essentially, part of the tax credits being 4% is non-competitive, the other part being the state tax credits are competitive. We've received both, as well as several other funding components to the project, permanent financing, et cetera. As you can see, there's a lot of components to the project. The park, the play space, a lot of things that we committed to doing, which we are fully committed to executing on, but also those things don't provide revenue. So the density also allows for the whole project to work, to be able to support the debt component to the project, to support all the community components that we committed to doing. So and then the fact that we've already competed, received the tax credits, yes, that would definitely jeopardize the project. As part of that process, we had to submit a market study that aligned with the exact unit count to tie into the pro forma. Everything had to match, everything had to, you know, basically kind of come together. So the density is definitely something that cannot be changed. And again, that density was in alignment with the RFP actually called for. There was actually additional points given for developments, I think above 120 units, if I'm not mistaken. So I just wanted to provide that additional clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman. I think Mr. Bango could provide some clarification on what was just stated about the different type of mechanisms of funding and what is associated with it.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Tony Bango. I'm Bureau Chief of Housing Development in the Department of Community Development. I raised my hand only briefly. Derek took my thunder from me and said everything that I was going to say about the 4% LIHTC credits and the OLIHTC credits. I will add that a project of this magnitude and scale has been a long shot from the get-go. It's really difficult to cobble these sources together, and the environment around the OLIHTC tax credits was extremely competitive, but the developer has put in a great effort to assemble sources, and they're pretty close now from a financial perspective to closing. The other detail that I will add on Councilwoman Spencer's comment about OFA's unit changing. I've been in the industry 10 years. I've never once heard of OFA allowing a decrease in a unit count. The reason for that is that they do competitive applications, especially in the OLIHTC and 9% LIHTC realms. And decreases in unit accounts could affect scoring and might bump up an application. It could result in an application that got denied should have been awarded. So they avoid, once they approve your application at initial application and before final application, you are locked in stone, really, as far as design elements can change, but unit mix and finances are expected to stay the same.
Thank you for that clarification. Then we will move on to Landmark staff recommendations.
All right, I think you guys have heard, I guess a lot of comment, a lot of feedback from the city and the public. So I won't let you guys digest all that. But I just wanted to point out that staff does feel that this project has improved through the process, as has been stated by the developer and councilwoman and city planning. I guess just on a personal note, I appreciate the masonry and the depth and richness of the different kind of textures and corbelling patterns they're proposing. I think that'll go a long way to kind of add, just add some richness to the facades. But I guess in general, staff all had specific items that we'd like to see additional details on, or that we felt could use more study. But in general, we don't feel that this violates the Secretary of the Interior standards. And so we'd recommend approval of the certificate of appropriateness, with staff kind of finalizing any details based on the feedback or any conditions that the commission would place on such an approval.
Thank you for that summary. We will now open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the applicant stated, this is their third time presenting formally in a hearing in front of the Landmarks Commission. I think that they've done a commendable job of reacting to our past comments from past presentations and to the comments and concerns of the City of Cleveland, the Planning Department, and the neighborhood specifically. So I commend the applicant for taking to heed the comments of all the constituents that have provided critical input for this project. Personally, my daughter lives at 7013 West Clinton, and she's lived there since 2016. So for 9 years, I've visited this neighborhood many, many times. I think that the traffic along West 74th has diminished considerably since the old school was demolished. I also note that a speed table was constructed at the intersection of West 74th and Franklin. And my experience is that traffic has diminished as it has in many of the cross streets that now intersect with speed tables. The one comment and concern that's been expressed that I have the most concern with myself is the entrance, the main entrance to the residence, and the opportunity for appropriate drop-off space along West 74th and the intersection of West Clinton. So I would like the applicant to respond to how they may study and react to those comments and concerns about creating appropriate drop-off space.
Our residential entry was mainly focused towards the transit development area. So while we are providing parking, the majority of it, we intend that the residents are taking advantage of public transit to cut down the demand on drop-offs and parking. In addition to that, we have reduced the parking through the TDM program that Mr. Law had mentioned earlier, to a 50% reduction in parking for the residential component, and have separated that from the building footprint parking that is associated with the commercial and office component along Detroit Avenue. So I think the intent or what we've designed towards is that the main entry is walkable to the community, and then it is walkable to the adjacent surface lot, whereas the building footprint parking that's accessible off 74th would be dedicated for the restaurant and office components along Detroit. We can certainly look at additional, recommendations for accommodating any of these requests. We hadn't seen a demand that would exceed, what we were anticipating as far as the automotive traffic for the resident itself, and how we've accommodated it through the parking and pedestrian access for the building.
When you say you haven't seen any evidence of, I'm going to say, a need for a specific dedicated blister or drop-off space, is that anecdotal, or do you actually have a traffic study, or what's backing up that assumption?
Yeah, we do not have a traffic study at this point. It was all, we approached this as a pedestrian related project and added parking. I guess that's one component that when we started this project, the parking was greatly reduced, assuming that it was going to be predominantly a pedestrian-oriented and public transit-oriented project. So as we've added parking back in, I guess that has complicated the perception of what we need to do for drop-offs and things of that nature. So
Do you think just adding like dedicated visitor parking that would accommodate drop-off, just signage wise, would satisfy?
Yeah,
that?
we do have dedicated loading and visitor parking that's at the building footprint that would be shared parking with the retail component. We can certainly dedicate signage and striping and allocations in that regard.
I personally think that may be sufficient. So I personally am hopeful that we can have a vote in terms of issuing the certificate of appropriateness today. And I just want to make sure that my fellow commission members are in agreement that we can put sufficient recommendations and conditions on that approval that will satisfy all of the community concerns. That's my hope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Can I ask a clarifying question to yours? Were you referring to a pickup drop-off area for like Uber or rideshare components, or for loading and unloading? What was the background in your comment?
You're asking that, are you directing that to me?
Yes.
Okay, so I was just reacting to what I heard from the community comments that were raised during the presentation.
Okay, I see. All right, thank you. Other questions and comments from the commission? Yes, Director Fields.
Yes, I just wanted to just comment on just the city's position. It has received a recommendation of approval from the mayor's office, as well as city planning. I echo the comments that Nate made. This is a project that meets a lot of the things that city planning is promoting now, which is our TOD sites. We're interested in increasing density in some of these areas to promote TOD, also promoting affordable housing. We feel like they have responded pretty well to most of the comments that have come from community and the requests from the RFP. We do understand that there are some concerns around traffic in the playground area. I think those are things that can be worked out with the city planner, but we are strongly in support of this project and would encourage the commission to support it with the conditions that they work with the planner to address those additional concerns.
Thank you, Director Fields. Other questions and comments from the commission? Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing, looking at that site plan just occurred to me. Yeah, I'm assuming that the townhouses are a for sale product, fee simple. And I wondered if you had planned for dedicated parking to accommodate those townhouses.
Those townhomes are for rent. And we have dedicated spaces behind the townhomes specifically for those residents.
All right, so that's a rental component. Okay, that's excellent. I didn't understand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The design they've made some improvements to the design since I've last seen it, but overall, the scale and massing is not appropriate for a historic district. You know, I used to live a few blocks away from here, and I still have a lot of affection for this neighborhood. And when I look at these projects, I ask myself, what would the late Judge Ray Pianka think? Judge Pianka was so pivotal in this neighborhood, and the reason that we still have a historic district here, and the reason that buildings like the abandoned City Savings fire damaged building is now condominiums. He's the reason that we still have the Gordon Square Arcade. That would have been a vacant lot. Likewise, the McKinley building, where Gypsy Bean is located, that building was ravaged by termites. No regular developer would have taken on that building. It was Detroit Shoreway, with the input of people like Ray Pianka, who kept those buildings alive and kept them as part of our fabric. And I know he would object to the massing of this. I know he would object to the scale. I know, since he was the councilman, concerns of the residents were paramount to him. He was my councilman. I didn't always agree with him. I didn't always like him, but he did have the concerns of the residents in his heart. And, there's no NIMBYism here. I read all those letters. People are welcoming the affordable housing. They want to see the neighborhood maintain, a variety of strata incomes. But, the RFP, if it required this increase of density, the original proposal was for like 80 units. And I know people were it was less units. If the city had an RFP, why wasn't it reviewed by the residents before it was put out there? People want the low-income housing, but there are quality of life issues that were repeatedly brought up in those letters that are not being addressed here. So it's just very frustrating to see this come to this point without the quality of life issues being either addressed or without a RFP that is something that would be acceptable to the community. I think we have this orthodoxy of density, which it's not like we are living in a community that has had 40 years of single family detached home density, on half-acre lots or whatever. This has been a multifamily area since its inception. Multifamily has been part of this community all along. You can see in this photo, you have a 4-story apartment building right there. It's 40 feet high. That and the 45-foot high City Savings building should be our template for what we are building in this community in a historic district. That's not what we have here. And it's just enormously frustrating that the RFP is in collision with the historic district and is not something that the neighborhood accepts, or by and large. I mean, I read those letters. It was overwhelmingly concerned and unsupportive of the project. So I can't support this project. And I think if we have any sensitivity to the neighbors, we need to revisit it, period. I'm sorry everybody went this far, but, we keep getting these projects that the neighbors don't want, and I think we're gonna do this at our peril. The last thing I want to say is there's plenty of land in the city of Cleveland. There are places where you can build things so that we aren't concentrating everything in a few dense neighborhoods, creating quality of life issues for the people around it. We have the land, we have that luxury. We don't have population pressures coming in like Salina, Texas, or Los Angeles. We can make a more rational development than what we have here. So that's all I have to say for now.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Other questions and comments from the commission?
Just one quick comment. The RFP that was created with the community. It apparently had, it says 2 months of community engagement process before the RFP was created. And that was what they utilized to determine that they wanted density in the community. So that's, I mean, the RFP was created with the community. It was not just done in-house with city officials and then put out. It actually engaged the residents and took their comments into consideration with the development, so.
All right. Thank you, Director Field. Ms. Anderson.
Thank you for that clarification. If that's the case, there seems to have been some sort of communication breakdown, because here we are at this point, and there's a lot of discontent in the community and in the neighborhood regarding this. So there must have been some sort of communication breakdown. And again, I think you cannot discount the concerns of the community. These are the taxpayers, these are the stakeholders, and a lot of people really put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into these neighborhoods. 30 years ago, this was, I lived there. It was not what it is now. And we have to be careful in making changes, I think, that are going to be detrimental to the progress that we've made already in these communities. Creating a totally different density isn't necessarily going to be beneficial. I think the downsides need to be discussed as well as the positives.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Other questions and comments from the commission? Mr. Dulick?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the third time here, and I know there's been an enormous process. I think just a few comments about the process, I guess, is, and this isn't the only example. I feel like we've run into this on other projects, and they're very pro forma driven. I think that's kind of the reality of real estate development, affordable or otherwise. In terms of some of the architectural challenges that this represents, how different is this really from the Bridgeworks project that this body labored over as kind of the arbiter of how do we resolve some of these goals, mutual goals that can wind up being conflicting. We run into things like this when we talked about the historic district and solar panels. I think when we run into it, the challenge of the desire for affordable housing and a certain level of density to support transit as a goal, but also that goal for open space. So I think it's when this body winds up, I can speak for myself, but I think we wind up in a position of being a bit of the arbiters of some of those things. And I think from my perspective, we are talking about what is appropriate. And when I say what's appropriate in a historic district, it has as much to do with how you craft the actual urbanism of the density, how you craft the relationship between the height and the street, how you craft the relationship between the building and the associated open space. I think there's a lot of parameters, I think, within a lot of the kind of creativity that's already been put into this particular project. I want to bring it back around to this. And I look at that and I think, you know, we can quibble over details and things like that, but how out of scale is it per se? I personally feel that it's as much about how massive it looks and appears as opposed to how massive it actually is. Relatively speaking, if we could pull up the site plan, please, I'd like to see it, just to think about this. And I think it's somehow a matter of proportion. I mean, that seems like a pretty good amount of coverage. I think what is a little bit unfortunate for me anyways is the double loaded large surface parking lot on 75th Street. I just find that urbanistically very challenging. And I know it's hard to make the decisions about what you prioritize. For me, not that this is necessarily where it should go, the townhomes feel a little vestigial. And I almost feel that to have a better, the park feels really squeezed to me. It's squeezed between the parking and the building. I feel I would almost rather have a better distribution of parking and open space than I would this kind of vestigial notion that these townhouses are somehow achieving what we heard loud and clear from the community was we want it to step down to that scale. I would posit a question or a notion that that open space has the opportunity to be that transition in scale. To the degree that I would even see, I think to me, the height where you get onto Detroit is actually pretty good. And again, acknowledging all the hard work and how far it has come. I guess I would like to, I'm not sure what the process is going to be, but I feel pretty strongly that we need a better balance between the surface parking we gotta have, the park everybody wants. That's priority number 2. First priority is affordable housing. And again, we can't necessarily be the arbiters. We have to be the ones as a commission that says, hey, this is how this can be designed to accommodate that level of density and the kind of housing for families appropriately. I am concerned about the visual, as you know, how you see when you're coming through that passageway through the building in a vehicle. Am I understanding that correctly, that that's where people come and go onto 74th from the parking that's behind the building?
Correct.
I have concerns about that. So again, I don't know about the process. I would definitely defer to my fellow commissioners, but particularly to Landmark staff and Madam Chair. Given the point we're at, this may be too big an ask, but I'm gonna ask it anyways. I know what we did at Bridgeworks. The notion was to really find a way to have something that actually is more collaborative and interactive between Landmark staff and the applicant. Because I feel like it is resolvable. I feel like this density and open space and parking is resolvable within the program as put forth by the city, because I know it's very financially driven. I feel like it's possible. I feel like I'm not there yet with this particular iteration. So I support the project as presented in the RFP. And I am appreciative of all the hard work that's gone in to get it to this point. But I feel pretty strongly that as I see it and as I look at it, I think to Ms. Anderson's point, although she's goes a lot farther maybe than I am, I think it's I think the iteration, I think there's still enough room for improvement in the iteration. And I feel it's essential that we find a way to do that as a body. That's it
No,
for now.
well
Thank
stated.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Jewell. I think that's well stated. I'm gonna ask one clarifying question and then I'll, make my remarks. Was the RFP, what was the number of units in the RFP? Was it for 167? So the RFP was for 120? Is that correct?
Let me
Go ahead.
let me provide this clarifying information. So the RFP was set up to award points. So people submit their application, and there were a number of metrics that we scored applications on. And it was set up to award points for applications that had so many units or more. And I can't remember the scaling off the top of my head, but if you give me a moment, I can take a look and look that up.
Oh. I got it. Madam Chair, I think the matrix is up on the scoring criteria is on the screen right now, if that's helpful. Sort of.
Yeah. Sort of.
Further defines
Well,
what
let's,
Anthony was saying.
Councilman Spencer, you say you have the unit count?
Yeah, I can help build up what Tony was.
Okay. I'm just trying your mic. You're used to
The
that.
RFP, there were many, many different categories. Affordability was the heaviest point structure. There was a much smaller category of point structure. So for example, 20 points were awarded for a high level of affordability. That was the top of the scale for affordability. 5 points were offered for the highest level of density. So if you provided 100 or more units, it was 3 points, 125 or more units, 4 points, and then it was 150 at 5 points. But if I'm not mistaken, this project as submitted when the city accepted the RFP was 124 units as originally presented. The developer went to OFA and increased it to 136. So in other words, there's always been debate about this density question, and it's playing out today again, right? There's that balance between, the benefits of density and then how does density coexist with a community, and certainly in a context of a historic district. The RFP grappled with that too. And so it's my understanding based on this that the developer would have been awarded the middle level 3 points for providing 124 units. And they increased it to 136.
And now we're at 167?
136. Am I correct about that unit count?
Yes, correct. We're at
136. Yeah, looks like I miswrote. Thank you. Okay. Okay, that is helpful. And you stated you have a mix of 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units. And how many beds? So was the unit count, that's unit count, how many beds are you accounting for when you total up the beds compared to the unit count?
So the unit mix itself, and we can do some math off the side here, but of the 136, 48 of the units are studios, 44 are 1 bedroom units, 32 are 2 bedroom units, and then we have 6 3 bedroom and 6 4 bedroom units. The 2, 3, and 4, those are split between the townhouses and then units also within the property for accessibility concerns.
So, okay, thank you. I'm just trying to generally see how many people it's bringing to the neighborhood compared to the 134 number. It feels, I'm not doing my math very quickly right now. It feels like it's would that be Mark? Did you do that too?
I can do it real quick though. 48, 44, 64.
It's about 200.
18 and 24. Yeah, it is about 200.
It's about 200 people, 200 bedrooms to the area. So I guess my position is very aligned with what Mr. Dulick said. I am in support of this project, and I do agree with you on the approach or the focus on bringing affordable housing to this area. But I do have still some concern of the general density of this related to the urban design approach to this, going really just to simple approach of this was a public space in the past. There was a lot coverage because of it that was balanced between built and open space. That open space was, because of being a school, viewed, right, wrong, or indifferent, as part of the public realm. Looking at this site and where it sits within the overall district, there is not any, or not any is the incorrect word. There is limited open public space in the direct, say, quarter mile of this site. It's very limited. There is Edgewater Park, larger expanses, but this was turned into their pocket park. That is what I'm hearing as one of the major concerns of the public, is the loss of that green space. The current site plan, based on how it is situated, I think has come a long way. But I do see and feel the public's challenge of the lack of green space. I appreciate the incorporation of the playground, but where it's situated in the site also makes it feel the perception that it's going to feel like a private playground and not the public's playground. And although I appreciate the incorporation of the picnic tables and so forth, it reduces the amount of green space that's available. And some people do and would like those picnic tables, but some people would just like some grass to sit in, a place to take their dog, things like that. That would, I assume, come with everyone, not only the 200 new people that you're bringing here, but everyone in the neighborhood surrounding it. So although I do think the project has come a long way, I do think it still needs some work to meet everyone's goals. And the goals in the neighborhood are to improve the site and redevelop it, but balance the redevelopment with meeting the needs of the community, since it is a publicly held property at this point. I think I do support the revisions that have been made related to the density on Detroit. I actually think it could be denser on Detroit. A single loaded in that area seems a little awkward to me. I would prefer that to be double loaded and take areas along 74th Street down to single loaded to really allow that step down of the structure to the street and the neighborhood. Or, as Mr. Dulick said, although I do appreciate actually the balance of different types of housing within the same development related to they're not townhomes because they are apartments, but we'll call them townhomes for right now. I do appreciate the balance of that. But I think it detracts from the project because, once again, it reduces the amount of green space that is accessible to the public. It really turns everything inboard. And part of the RFP was to incorporate things that could be space that could also be appreciated and used by the public. So although I think the project is come a long way, I guess I am aligned with Mr. Dulick and feel that there are parts of this project that should be studied before I personally could approve it. Because the concept is good, but the execution's just not quite there yet. And could the adjustment of, if it's really down to unit count, could some of this be achieved by adjusting the unit mix slightly to meet the unit count that's needed to be compliant with the RFP but address some of the concerns of the public. So I personally feel like this might be a project that should be tabled to allow some of this further development, because I think we're close. We're really close, but I personally don't feel like we're there yet. Other questions and comments from the commission? Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to address some concerns I have about the townhouses. There are townhouse developments existing in the historic district, mainly along Franklin Boulevard. In fact, there's a block of them, I believe, that's shown in the at the corner of 75th and Detroit. I mean, and Franklin. There's another 4 townhouses at the corner of 79th and Franklin. And most of and the townhouses that we have are brick. They usually have bay windows, and they usually have flat roofs. So I think the townhouse that we already have in the area should inform the design of the townhouses that are being built, and this is not referenced in these townhouses. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Another question for the applicant with regard to parking versus green space and a community green space. Did I hear during the presentation that the parking was expanded to address community concerns about adequate parking? Or was that not correct?
Yes, that's correct. The site plan and orientation of the elements that you see today have gone through quite a variation. We have at times had, just like this image shows here, where that it was all green space in lieu of the picnic tables and seating areas that are shown on the more updated site plan. That was in direct reference from our last community meeting where unprogrammed green space was called into concern, that we weren't taking advantage of the green space that we had the opportunity to. The same with parking. We had a greatly reduced parking load early on in the project, but through increased community outreach, and what we heard was that even with the opportunity to lean into the transit-oriented development and the TDM, that it was going to be a burden on the community, and we wanted to be a good partner and not, we wanted to listen, right? And added additional parking spaces to reach a threshold where we felt everyone was kind of heard and felt comfortable with. So in terms of the green space or pulling the playground closer to 74th to make it more attainable, again, this has gone back and forth several times between community meetings as far as should it be held in closer to the site to not have a noise issue with the adjacent residences and security concerns beside the 74th as a throughway, and back and forth. So, with this group, we can certainly entertain the idea of moving some of these parts and pieces within the existing footprint of what we're working with. And certainly it's trade-offs, as we've all seen on the evolution of this. If we reduce parking, we can increase green space. This initially was a green space oriented project, which we felt we had a little bit of a loss every parking space we added by
Did you
request.
get specific feedback from the community in your meeting on the 29th with regard to this solution? In balancing green space and parking?
Well, I think what we've heard now is that both are wanted, right? Increase of parking and increase of green space.
All right.
And while I'm sure we all wish the parcel was larger to accommodate everything. When we started with the program and the footprint, our height restrictions, all these components, as the project developed, this is where it's been laid out. We'd like to think we've done it thoughtfully and carefully, and taking all parties' concerns. But we often have conflicting shareholders as far as community or commissions or feedback. So we're trying to do a good work where we make as many people satisfied, maybe not happy, but try and satisfy all the commentary with a project that still works.
Does the amount of parking provided exceed code requirements?
So in the new TDM program, there is not a parking requirement per se. There's a point system. So in reference to prior zoning, it would have been a 1-to-1 parking for the residential. We have reduced that 50%, but we have maintained the estimated parking load for the commercial portion based on square footage of the restaurant as code had required. Again, thinking that while the restaurant that we're in talk to is meant to be like a local walk up, but we know that things change and we don't want to burden this project long term with no parking associated with retail components. So we are holding the retail.
Under current zoning, you have provided adequate parking, perhaps in excess of what would be determined to be adequate parking given a transit-oriented development.
Correct.
All right. So, I've heard Mr. Dulick was very articulate, I think, in communicating his concerns with regard to consideration of green space. And I think it's unfair to ask an applicant to, go back and forth, given varying inputs and be on a yo-yo with regard to more parking, more green space. It's just not fair. I think you've been trying to be responsive and come up with the appropriate solution. So I personally would just make it a condition that the parking versus green space ratio be studied and that a solution be developed with Landmark staff that satisfies both the applicant and Landmark staff that it's an appropriate ratio of green space to parking.
Okay.
I'd be satisfied with that.
Yeah,
we would certainly be willing to do that. And just one other thing I want to go back to referencing, the unit mix as well as the unit count are interconnected. So when we say they're lots, we're speaking about both the unit mix and count. But to your recommendation, Mr. Strickland, we would be perfectly fine with that.
All right, thank you. So we'll see how my fellow commissioners think of that idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Other questions and comments from the commission?
I just want to say that I agree with Mr. Strickland's comments. I think it's not fair to ask the applicant to keep going back and forth. I mean, you have a lot of competing interests, different people who are making recommendations that conflict. And I just think that asking the applicant to go back and forth, add parking, take parking away, it's not fair. And we have to figure out, I think I agree working with the staff would be appropriate to be able to come up with a solution that addresses the concerns that have been raised. So I'm in 100% agreement with Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Director Fields. Other questions and comments from the commission? Would someone like to put forward a motion? Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to put forth a motion to approve this issuance of a certificate of appropriateness with the applicant meeting with staff to develop the appropriate ratio and layout of green space and parking. Also consider relocation of the underground storage tanks to better accommodate landscaping, that the city arborist be consulted in the development of the permanent landscaping plan for shade trees to be incorporated into the development, that appropriate signage be developed to identify visitor parking and unloading zones to alleviate concerns with unloading at the main entrance. What am I missing?
I think the study of the playground green space was also a recommendation of the local review.
Right. So that it would be done at the same time with between the applicant and staff as they adjust the parking and green space layout.
All right, so we have a motion. Thank you. Mr. Strickland, do we have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Director Fields. We have a motion, second. Any further discussion?
Yes. I want to say that if we continue forward with this project, it's at the peril of the city's credibility with the community. And it's at the peril of this particular historic district. This is going to really impact this district negatively. This is, the massing the scale is too large. There is another lot at the corner of Lake and Detroit, you know, not just a few feet from this. Big vacant lot. So what are we gonna get there? You know, this goes from 60 feet to what, 70 feet, and you know, 300, 400 units. I think we are really damaging the historic district by moving forward with this. And I also think that we are damaging our relationship with the community, and that is even more grave than the buildings and the structures. So that I wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. I have one clarifying question, just so that before we move forward with the motion. What do you need to pursue variances on this project? That would be directed to the applicant. What variances, if any, are you pursuing for this project?
No variances at this time.
Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion. Any further discussion? All right, not seen any. Mr. Nelson, please call roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson,
No.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Dulick,
No.
Director Fields,
Yes.
Councilmember Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Samberry,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Trasick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Ms. Trot.
No.
And Madam Chair, the motion passes by a vote of 7-3.
All right, well, congratulations. Your project has been approved. We look forward to seeing your project progress.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We look
Thank
forward
you.
to working with you.
Thank you. Yes.
Is the project approval with the condition?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, so we'll now move on to our next applicant, located at 1979 West 25th Street, addition and renovations to the West Side Market.
Madam Chair, I will recuse.
Thank you. Just pull more chairs off. It's all good. We're happy to see people come, that come to see us. If you don't mind introducing yourselves and then tell us about your project. Yes.
Here we go. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Amy Haney, Project Manager at DLR Group for the renovation and additions at the West Side Market. I also am joined by Jacob Stolfus, a project architect with DLR Group, Rosemary Mudry from Cleveland Public Market Corporation, and Chris Panicki from PMC, owner's rep for the project. So thank you for your comments in the October meeting. We are back here for a request for a final design review and certificate of appropriateness. I think that the comments I received in October were very well received, very appreciative of those comments, and I'm hopeful that you will be happy with what we're presenting here today. The computer there we go. So just to orient on the site so that you know what we're talking about. There is the main market hall, which is staying as it is, except for some two small additions. The North Arcade to the north of the market hall and the East Arcade. There's a loading dock to the east of the market hall that is getting some new concrete and patch and replace on the decking there. And then there is an alley between the market hall and the North Arcade, which will house the additions and a new courtyard. And then the North Arcade will be the location of a prepared food hall. And then the East Arcade will house all of the produce vendors that are currently taking up both of the arcades. Just to give some context, where we were last month when we came in for the approval of the utility yard fence that is in the northern parking lot that is off the property that we are considering for lead credits and for the historic boundary of the historic tax credits that are actually being submitted today for an addendum. So this is our grading plan and their civil drawings. There's still some updates that we have to do to the paving patterns and where landscaping is located, but just to give you an idea of utilities, we're not changing much about how the site is draining. We're adding a drain in the middle of the courtyard there in between the two connectors, but otherwise the water is still going to the east in the drive lane between the parking lot and the East Arcade, and to the west to 25th Street. Go past these quickly. This is the current survey to give you an idea of where the utilities are, and we're not changing those. And then here is our proposal again to get you oriented. Mechanical yard to the north, which has already been approved. The courtyard space, which is in between the Market Hall and the North Arcade, going out onto 25th Street. And then the loading dock area and the trash is between the eastern edge of the Market Hall and the East Arcade. Just to give some context, which I hope we're all very familiar with, but I just wanted to stay on the slide for a second to note that all of the doors and windows on the Market Hall are going to be replaced, except for the large windows on the east and west facade, which you see there in the top right corner. Those are staying in place, and the green that is on those windows is going to be the green that we are trying to match as a color that is in the package later. There are actually about 7 or 8 greens on the West Side Market that everyone calls West Side Market green, but there is only one moving forward. We're hopeful that we can accomplish that. Let's give some context on the arcades, on the approach from the parking lots and from 25th. We're looking down on the top right from 25th into the courtyard space, right where that orange cone or orange traffic bollard will be where our first planter location is located to kind of not block off, but to identify where the courtyard begins.
some elevations to show the windows and doors being replaced. And here is the elevations for the arcades. We are replacing all of the garage doors, man doors, and windows on the arcades. On the north arcade, any operable doors that are going in and out would be overhead garage doors that instead of rolling up as they are now, they will be kind of flipping up. That's a run-mated door that is at the end of the presentation. And then on the east arcade, the service doors are, instead of being garage doors, would be a double door that opens into each vendor's stand. You can see the elevations on the bottom left there. This is a view from West 25th looking into the connector piece, which we'll get into a little bit later. There is an elevation change in that alley that we are making up, and then we are coming into the east arcade, or to the north arcade there at a spot where the roof actually bumps up. So that is a very specifically chosen location to locate that connector piece there. I'm actually going to hand over to Jacob here if you want to talk about the design of the connectors.
Thank you, Amy. So here's some elevations of the connectors, but we'll kind of just glance through these because really the design of the connector was more about the experience of the connector, and you don't really experience something in direct elevation. You experience it as you approach it as a pedestrian. So that was really our focus of the design process of creating those connectors. But here's a plan that indicates where the connectors are occurring within the overall plan of the market and arcades. So you can see that the connectors are the primary intervention that's really happening within this project on the exterior of the building. Putting the connectors in where we currently have the alleyway provides the opportunity of creating that courtyard that you see between the connectors, and then sort of an outer courtyard that faces West 25th. And then here's a roof plan indicating the connectors in relationship to the low roof of the arcade building that wraps the main market. Specific roof plan. And so, as I mentioned, the design process for the connectors was more about the pedestrian experience. Here's a view of looking down what is currently the service alley. The creation of these courtyards wanted to be celebrated as being these public spaces, but at the same time providing these enclosed connections between the arcade and the market hall to allow patrons to be able to move between the two in an enclosed environment. But we didn't want that enclosure to then block off the visual accessibility to that inner courtyard. So essentially, this is creating like a picture window to allow you to see through from West 25th into that inner courtyard to be able to see inside and what that experience could be if you enter the market and partake in the activities. So again, as you approach this, what was the service alley, we do have a planter that is set out towards the street to kind of help define the edge of where that first courtyard occurs prior to the first connector. The experience is that this is not meant to be a primary entrance. We want people to be driven through the arcades and into the area where there is the retail stands so that people can experience the interior of the market without circumventing that. So this is really about a courtyard experience for the patrons after they've engaged with the market and not something to bypass the market. So here's a little bit closer view of that connector specific. So the connector itself does have doors. The doors will function as egress from the courtyard, as a means of egress from the courtyard. So we're not blocking off the courtyard entirely. You still have the ability to move through, but that didn't want to be the primary focus. We did study various iterations where we had the possibility of opening up this entirely as with a movable type of partition. The issue with the movable partition and the type of detailing that would have been required, it would have made this a lot more bulky and sort of chunky, which would have taken away the visual connection when it was in its closed position. And unfortunately, what happens so often, especially in Cleveland climate, is that when you have an operable door like that, it operates a few times, and then things start to break down because of salts and cold and snow and et cetera. And so we often find that what happens is you use it a few times, you put it in its closed position, and then it just stays close. So we wanted to make sure that when it was in a closed off position, that it still had the visibility. So we felt the best solution to that was to just provide a picture window with doors on either side, so that you have a simple, straightforward method of moving through the arcade, both as you go from moving through the connector, both as you go from the arcade to the market, and also from the outer courtyard to the inner courtyard. So here's a view within the courtyard. Again, a mix of seating styles within the courtyard and various opportunities for shading, for people to be able to grab food from the prepared foods in the new prepared foods stands in the North Arcade, and have places to actually sit and eat and not just sit on the edge of a windowsill as you currently do. And then the connector towards the back, and I'm going to go back to this previous view because that's not attractive. This view is looking towards the second connector, what we call the east connector, towards the east end of this courtyard. The view of that will have a very similar feel to this one, similar composition with the glazing and the doors. The back side of that connector is a service corridor. So there's a elevator and stair that goes directly down to the basement, because the basement of the market actually does extend under the site in its current condition. So we're putting in an elevator and a stair to be able to have more direct service access from the basement and the storage opportunities for tenants up to the arcades and the market, so that they have better, more direct access to their products. So this is really looking at the backside of that service component. So we're really not looking to spend precious dollars on an area that is facing the service alley. This is really just a very functional space, using CMU in order to withstand the abuse that it's going to see from tenants going in and out on a very regular basis, using tow motors to pull their product. So this is going to be very utilitarian. Now, with that said, the windows that you're seeing on the right that do look into the North Arcade, that's actually the back of a tenant stand. So you really don't have a typical patron visibility to this facade. And again, it's tucked back within the alley behind the loading dock. So it doesn't have a necessarily public sight lines to it. And Amy, do you want me to keep talking about the courtyard? So here's a plan of the courtyard, looking at some of the furniture mix and the different types of movable furniture that would be occurring within the courtyard, as well as some of the fixed pieces. So you can see sort of in the middle of that courtyard on the market side, so that's the bottom of the courtyard, we have some planters with benches that will be more of a fixed piece versus the more movable furniture. And then looking at some of the planting proposals for within those planters, as well as the pavers that would be occurring in the inner courtyard and in the outer courtyard up to the sidewalk line at the street of West 25th. So we're looking at a paver that is a blend of different shades of gray. So here's an enlargement of those proposed plantings and pavers. And here's a better rendered plan of the seating and those pavers and that mix. Also note that there are the string lights that occur over the courtyards. These catenary lights would be able to provide lighting for evening time experience for people dining.
This time, no.
No, good point. We're not looking for the approval of those. The only other planting that's really occurring in this project is we are providing some screening at the loading dock entrance off of Lorraine. Currently, you really just see the vehicles, service vehicles parked right up to that sidewalk edge, and we're looking to try and soften that a little bit by adding some planting both there and on the east side of that driveway next to the arcade. And you'll note that on the east arcade, which is the arcade where the produce tenants will be located, that there are some doors that come out of the south side of that arcade directly from the tenant. So we want to make sure that as those doors are used and the potential for a tenant to be able to put some of their product out on the sidewalk, that we have some screening from that to the actual loading dock area. Looking at materials, the materiality, here's several pictures where we're proposing on the connectors, that public side of the connectors, the solid material is a zinc, and we had several samples of different types of zinc, and we selected the one that the arrow is pointing at on these various pictures. You'll note that as the sun hits it from different angles, it starts to get different sort of tints to it. Zinc is a natural material, and so it's going to have that sort of variation, and especially as the sun hits it, will present itself differently throughout the day. And this is what we have here is a sample of that, or actually this is that sample that was in the pictures. So the manufacturer is Rhine Zinc. So for anyone else, let's see. The other material used on the connectors, and I might have to back up to show this a little bit, because I didn't mention this before. So in this view, you can see that the connector itself is like a portal. To the left, you'll notice a dark area. So this is really to emphasize the connector as an individual element that is separate and distinct from both the market and the arcades. So where it actually connects into either of those two buildings, we're proposing a different, darker material. It's Decton, which is essentially a non-vitreous, basically like a ceramic tile, but it's full color all the way through. And so that will help to sort of distinguish that central piece as it's a separate element, and to kind of address the design decisions on this, because both the market and the arcade have very different modules. The structure of the two buildings don't line up, despite the fact that they were built at the same time. The doors don't actually line up. The datum lines of the different pieces of their elevations don't line up. And so we really wanted to make this element between the two buildings separate from those by lending itself to one datum or the other, it would then ignore the other building. Like if you were to line up with the market hall, then nothing about it would line up with the arcade and vice versa. So it really becomes something that's distinct between the two. However, from this rendering, you can kind of see that despite the fact that it doesn't perfectly line up with either, it's sort of intended to bridge the two elements. And also, I think to point out in this view that the elevation, the ceiling is at about 10 feet. And the reason it is, when it enters into the actual market hall, that door is itself about 10 feet. And so we didn't want to bring that ceiling down and then have to, as you go into the market, create a soffit. So we're trying to create as seamless of transition between the two as possible. So what else could I say about this? I think we'll just keep going. Yeah, so we did have an image of Decton. Oh, went a little too far. So this is that Decton material in use. So it is used both interior, exterior applications. The colors selected, so this color of white is closely matches what's currently on the arcades. So this is what we're proposing for any of the white trim. And then the green, this is obviously will color match perfectly, but this is pretty close to the green that is on the windows that are staying. So as Amy mentioned, there are a plethora of different greens, but because those monumental windows are the ones that are staying, that's going to now dictate what is the market green going forward. And also I don't know, did you have the window images in here?
There at the end.
Oh, okay. So this is the storefront system used. Kind of breeze through that. As Amy mentioned before, we have the Renlita doors, which is not a roll-up door, but it's a lift-up, a tilt-up door.
Can I jump in and just mention a couple quick things about why we chose the doors we chose? In the produce arcade, one of the challenges now with traditional garage doors is the tracks get a little wonky over time. It's very hard to create a seal at the bottom. And so, as we think about the 21st century needs of the property, pest control and, there's very minimal HVAC in the arcades. These types of doors that are selected are both, to mimic the history of the building, but also to ensure that the arcades are a more functioning, climate-controlled space and much more secure and pest-controlled space than they have been in the past. So there's a lot of thought into like what are the interventions to help make this operationally better for everyone.
So, and to note that those doors, we only have a limited number of those, really for the reasons that Rosemary just outlined. Most of the what you currently see as garage doors will just be storefront. Where we do have these lift up doors are really about creating that porosity for the user experience really into those courtyards. So there's a few that will face the alleyway to the north of the arcades, the North Arcade. But a lot of these are used to really open up the courtyard in fair weather. And then we mentioned the historic window replacement. So a lot of the windows, well, all the windows on the market, except for the monumental windows, will be replaced. And we do have the original drawings for the market where we are replicating the configuration of the original windows as closely as possible. And so this is actually showing the window portions that have the sort of lines through them, the hatch through it. Those are from the original drawings. And then these are the drawings of the current aluminum, thermally broken, current technologically advanced windows. But you can see that the configuration is as close as we could possibly get it with these types of components.
And I think that's it.
That concludes our presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. We will then move on to Design Review Advisory Committee recommendations.
And thank you, Madam Chair. The Historic Ohio City Design Review Advisory Committee saw this project last week on February 20th. They expressed gratitude for the changes since the last meeting. They particularly appreciated livening up the pavers. And they voted unanimously to recommend the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness as presented.
So thank you. And then landmark staff recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this project, as noted previously, reviewed conceptually in 2024. We understand they've been working with the State Historic Preservation Office and National Park Service for tax credits, and so we're really appreciative of that and the care that's been taken in making sure that they are accurately replicating what they can, and then also being clear to have these new additions be very clearly modern and not, compete with the architecture of the existing arcade and market halls. And so staff is in support, similar to the Design Review Advisory Committee for this project.
Thank you. We'll then open up the floor of the commission for questions and comments.
Thank you. I do have a couple questions. At first, I think this is a great project. I think it's gonna, make great use of the arcade spaces. People can visit a lot better. How you currently have connection or door entries into the halls and the market. Are those changing at all? Are you opening those, expanding them, or are they physically going to be, maintained in just an envelope sits around it?
So we're not proposing to eliminate any doors to the market, like from the market hall to the courtyard. You can see they'll just, instead of connecting to an alleyway, they'll connect to the courtyard. So folks could still, when the garage doors are up in the summer, they might come out of the produce arcade, hang out in the courtyard, and then they could go right into the market in one of the, additional doors that currently exists on the building. So is that what you're referring to?
The two openings into the connector, are those being changed at all, or is the connector just sitting between the two buildings?
Yeah, generally. So I guess, I was going to say if we can get to a plan, might be able to describe that.
Sorry, I misunderstood what you're, I thought you're asking if you're closing the doors to the courtyard from the market hall.
Is there any dismantling of the existing door entries on two historic buildings?
No, but yes. So the only thing that actually is really occurring in order to make the connectors function is that the current configuration of as you can see along the side, there's 6 of these doors on both sides of the market. Actually, on the alley side, there's only 5. One of those doors is actually a window. Oddly enough, the original drawings had it as a door, and then they built it as a window. So fun fact. But each of those entrances has a double set of doors, so it creates a very small vestibule. And so as we are directing people from the arcade into the market through these connectors, we wanted to try and eliminate that extra barrier, because you're creating essentially a vestibule in front of the market by having this connector. And so we are removing the outer door. So the inner door from inside the market hall itself, you'll still see all the doors as they currently exist. It's just that on those 2 locations where the connectors are being added, that outer door that is now being basically encapsulated by the connector will be removed. But the connector itself, the method for the connector to connect into the building is to actually take the door opening and create a little portal that just fits in that door opening. So that we're trying, obviously, as a historic building and a sensitive landmark type building, we want to make sure that our interventions are as minimal as possible. So we're just sort of inserting a little portal into that door opening, removing the outer door, and then sealing that in that method.
So are you retaining the frame of the door and just taking the door off the
Yeah,
hinges, basically?
essentially,
Okay.
yeah.
So is potentially if in the future this is reversible?
Yes,
That's what I'm trying to get at, right?
If someone 100 years from now said this was a huge mistake, it can be reversed, yes.
Okay.
I think the other thing is, part of the reason to do the connectors is to create better accessibility in the market. And so, the thought is be as light on the touch as possible, but also try to eliminate some of the barriers and challenges. And right now, going from one arcade to the other, there's 3 sets of doors. So you're like, if you have a stroller or a wheelchair or you're pulling a cart, the number of heavy duty doors you have to go through is very cumbersome. So the part of this intervention is, don't make it reversible, but also hopefully increase the accessibility and make it easier for folks. So that was sort of the balance we tried to strike.
And I don't know if this probably isn't under our purview really. Is there any security concerns with some of these alcoves that you're creating? So maybe in the back, in the docking station, that's not going to be visible from anywhere from public right away. Are you taking any concerns?
I would say it's not visible to the public, but it is highly visible to the people who work there because the market is essentially a 24-hour operation, and the loading dock, the service area, that particular entrance in to get to the elevator and the stairs is going to be very active pretty much at all times.
Yeah, I'd also add, so that back area right now, we have the reverse security concern because on a Thursday when the market is closed, what happens is people don't remember which side of the produce arcade connects to the parking lot. And so especially in the summertime, you have folks coming from lunch in the neighborhood who start walking up that alley and then enter the dock area and are then either turn around or they pass through the dock with trucks. So I think actually for us in terms of security concerns, it reduces them because it helps create an actual back of house with less confusion. Tenants are using pallet jacks and machinery and there's, large trucks. And so, right now that mixing sometimes is very anxiety producing. And then as he said, from a market operations standpoint, many of the produce vendors are there from 4 o'clock in the morning on. So this is really that back of house is pretty much active all the time. We also have securities operations are located right next to the dock. And so all night long, there's a security guard at the dock who then also makes rounds throughout the whole building. And then there's cameras and other things. But so I think from our perspective, it alleviates some of our concerns from maybe less security, but safety from the public in separating some of those back of house from front of house issues that sometimes occur right now.
And then my last point, I know you said you're not, the string lighting is not part of this application, but in the future, where that connects would ideally be in the mortar. So we're not looking at that today, but just a point of.
Yeah, similarly, the SHPO issues and making sure that again, any sort of intervention or connection to the building is as light and reversible as possible. But yeah.
We're not applying for the lighting right now with SHPO either.
Yeah.
So that's why we're not.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions and comments from the commission? Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. Given that this intervention is trying to be, as minimal as possible, my one concern, and maybe it's the renderings that you have, is the color seems a little dark, and I know you mentioned the zinc looks different in different lighting. But I think my preference would be that the connector incorporate more colors that are in like the natural stone or the colors that are more intrinsic to the existing market building.
Yeah, I think we did do full studies on the materiality. One of the issues that we ran into when we were looking to try and potentially use a stone or a brick is that you can't really match the existing stone or brick. And then if you're adding another material, then it's just like another, you already have multiple stones and bricks. And if you added another stone or brick, it would just be confusing the palette.
I'm not asking for another stone or brick. I'm just saying that the connector seems to be dark and gray compared to the palette of the building. And
That's, yes. I would say that the various, I mean, as you can see in these photos, that material sometimes looks dark, sometimes it looks almost green. And then other times it looks very light. So
Like matches the stone.
and yeah, and so there's throughout the day it's gonna change. It's gonna be
It is a
a
natural.
different experience because it is a natural material.
yeah,
Tina over the years, you know, soften.
it'll be less dark. Yeah, it's-
And that's the copper follow.
It, yeah, zinc weatherizes.
yeah, that's my one concern is that it's,
We'll have that natural feel.
yeah, I'm glad it'll have the natural feeling. I just would like it to mimic the colors or the palette that's already there. And I think that wouldn't help it to recede, you know, to kind of disappear and let the historic building dominate.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Other questions and comments? I'll go next. I think what you're probably referring to is either like a champagne aluminum or a light bronze is probably what you're trying to articulate, a lighter material that is not as dominant. I mean, overall, I think this is a great project. And I really appreciative of the light touches that you're doing and trying to work within the architecture. Just some minor questions or clarifications, like in the inclement we've talked about the doors and the porosity and all of this, but we also know that our weather, it's maybe 5 months if we're lucky that we get to do that. So the majority of the time, these are going to be closed. So in first clarification, you said that you do not want people to use the connector as an entry point.
As a primary entrance.
As a primary entry point. You know, if they would use when those doors are not open, are these the main entrances into the courtyard?
No, all the existing doors on the arcade, so the primary entrances and exits to the arcade are still existing. So, you know, folks coming off the parking lot would still probably enter in that main elbow. Folks coming from West 25th would still enter there. And then from the courtyard, there would still be regular doors as there are now to go in and out. Those garage doors are located adjacent to seating simply to provide opportunity for air, not as an entrance or exit. I mean, they'll certainly function that way in nice weather, but you know, the arcade will function similarly to how it functions now in the winter time.
My only comment would be, did you ever explore taking those doors and putting them in the recessed areas that are separating the existing buildings to the connector piece itself? If those are not supposed to be, you need them for egress, but they're not an exit, element.
Yeah, so we did look at that. Part of the issue with that is trying to get those doors tucked back into those spaces. You end up taking the connector itself and really reducing the width of it. And that ended up reducing that visibility through the connector into the courtyard. So by taking those doors and sort of essentially putting them next to the connectors, adjacent to the existing buildings, really limited the sight lines in through the connector piece as it's currently designed.
I think the other thing was, as we started looking at like circulation and flow and seating, the having the doors on the the outside edge of the connector really helped create stronger pathways through the courtyard and in and out of the market, and allow seating to be clustered in, I think, in a nicer way. So I think that was, I think initially when we started exploring that operationally, the sort of full opening doors were going to be really problematic, probably with the volume of people that go through, plus, the visibility. That was sort of our next thing that we looked at was, could you use those same type of doors to open in the middle, or double doors? And so we looked at a lot of those. And I think that combination of like the visibility in plus the circulation, we landed on this that feels like it'll be a nice way so that people aren't also constantly standing in front of the doors, blocking passageway and things like that.
My other comment would be on the service elevation, which understandably you need a backup house, and that is your backup house. The color seems just very stark to me. Most service areas, you sort of paint it out, your doors out to match your brick or your block. My personal preference would be, it appears to be white in your rendering, which could be wrong. It might not be your intended color, but I personally would prefer if it's painted to match the brick, just so that when you're visually looking through and catch a glimpse of it, it just falls away to the eye. Minor little detail, but I think it can go a long way.
Yeah, I would say that rendering is not representative of what our intent is. I think we were looking at more of a buff type of CMU unit.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would be actually
That matches more the stone.
matches the stone. Yeah.
Base of the
Right.
market.
I personally think it may want to match the brick itself if you're, just because your windows are up high too. So you're not visually seeing it with a stone, water table. You're seeing it with a brick that of the, either the connectors or the arcades for the market itself. So that's my personal preference, is that I think just visually the continuity in that area, and it would also probably hide the dirt and all of the muck. The darker the color is versus a white or a stone, especially, we all get the why. And then distance, I think that's all I have. But overall, I'm in support of this project. I think it's great. Other questions and comments from the commission? Not seeing any. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve as presented. With some recommendations on color change, but not a requirement. And I think that's it.
That's it. So the exploration of the color on the connector and exploration on the color of the connector. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
Thank you. Director Fields, we have motion, second. Any further discussion? Ms. Anderson?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I'm ready to vote.
If you hide behind Dan, I can always say, so he's always trying to help. All right, not seeing any further discussion. Mr. Mussing, please call roll.
All right, thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dreyer?
Yes.
Director Fields?
Yes.
Mr. Sambry?
Yes.
Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Trosik?
Yes.
Dr. Williams?
Yes.
And Ms. Trot?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes by a vote of 8-0 with one recusal.
All right, congratulations. We look forward to seeing your project move forward.
Thank you. Yes.
So, thank you. That concludes our certificates of appropriateness for today. We'll move on to administrative reports.
Nothing particular to report today.
All right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, well then that concludes our meeting. We'll adjourn for today and see everyone at our next meeting in 2 weeks. All right. Have a great day. Thank you.